Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is a story about what if Naruto has more than one bloodline. Part 2. If you guys enjoy this, what if? And want to see part 3? Comment down below. And let me know before I start. Please do support for more awesome content. And leave a like and don't forget to subscribe to my channel. And also share this video with your friends. And check out the description. And check out my playlist. So let's start the video. Chapter 5. Nothing's really changed, has it? Neji walked to the room they had put Naruto in. It had felt like a long night, with Hanabi being all excited to move to Konoha and him worrying about the necklace of the Shodaime Hokage being broken when they tried to insert the translator. He made it a point to take death threats from legends very seriously. Thankfully, the worry had been for naught. The translator had been successfully installed in the necklace. "Morning guys," he greeted the guard standing in front of Naruto's door. "How's it been?" "The only thing we really heard was a lot of mumbling and the occasional curse. Other than that, it's been pretty quiet," the guard on the left answered his question. "Has anyone tried to visit him?" They knew that despite their best attempts at keeping it quiet, someone always finds out. "Only a couple of doctors who were curious about why we were guarding a room," the guard on the right answered. "We told them we were guarding a VIP who wanted to remain anonymous. They didn't push after that." "Alright, thanks for letting me know." He walked past the guards and into the room. He found Naruto fast asleep with his head on top of the translation book. He hoped he didn't drool on the book. It wasn't his to begin with. "Naruto, you have to wake up." He shook the blonde slightly. Naruto came awake in an instant. As he slowly raised his head, getting the grogginess out, he noticed Neji standing over him. Good morning, he said, trying to use some of the English he had learned during the night. He had learned a couple of words, but that was all so far. "Spent the night trying to learn English?" Neji asked the mandatory rhetorical question. His accent was thick and he struggled to say the words. Naruto was about to say yes but decided against it and just nodded his head. "This should help you out immensely." Neji handed him Shodaime's necklace. He took and placed it around his necklace. As he did, he heard a faint peeping in his ears. "Where's that noise coming from?" he asked with a little annoyance. "It's just the translator getting started. It's nothing to worry about," the Hikage assured him. "Are you sure?" "How was the bed?" he asked, switching to English. The blonde looked at him with an odd look. "What are you talking about?" "I fell asleep at the table." "You saw that," he answered, unaware that Neji had switched languages. "Yes, I did. But I was making sure the translator was working." "It is?" he asked, surprised. The peeping had disappeared but he hadn't really noticed. It had sounded like Neji had been speaking elemental the entire time. "Kami, that's impressive." "But it is. But you should probably still study the dictionary just in case you ever lose the necklace." "Yeah, you've got a point." He could already tell it was going to be hard and painful. But he still had to do it. "Anyway, time for the food," he declared, walking towards the door. "After you, Naruto," Neji said as he followed the blonde. "I hope he isn't as hungry as he was yesterday," he mentally prayed. They walked through the door and out into the hallway, the two guards falling in behind them. As they walked down the hall, three members of the group could only chuckle silently as the fourth kept looking around in amazement. Naruto was still surprised by all the things he saw. He kept looking at different things. When he passed a Solarian or A, he had a look of wonder on his face, although when he passed A, he also had a look of stunned confusion. Whenever he passed by, he felt awkward and embarrassed by the grace they held themselves with. Unknown to him, he was making a few of them turn their heads to look at him as he walked by. As they walked into the cafeteria, the guards taking position outside the entrance, they saw Hanabi sitting with her grandfather. "Daddy, over here," she called out when she saw the two of them. Neji smiled as he saw his daughter. "Give us a moment, Hanabi," he called back. "We need to get breakfast and then we'll sit with you." He and Naruto walked over to the line and got their breakfast. "That's your daughter?" Naruto asked as they put food on their plates. "Is she adopted or something?" "No, she's not adopted. She is fully my daughter." He threw a quick look back at the child. "But she's Anne, isn't she?" Asari adults were beautiful. The Asari kids were cute. She did have the eyes of Hikage, though. "Ah, that's right. I forgot you don't know much about this." He shrugged his shoulders. "I know they're very attractive and have a grace that makes me feel like a clumsy idiot, although that last part might be because of girls in general." He didn't have a lot of experience in that area. "Oh, don't worry. They make us all feel like that. But back to the point, when an is born, they are 100%. They don't receive anything from their father." "Really? Nothing?" He looked again. Father and daughter had the same eyes. Neji noticed what he was seeing. "That's what they say. Of course, that's in debate right now." "What happened?" the blonde asked as they made their way back to the table. You showed up, he answered quietly, so only the blonde could hear him as they sat down at the table. In any case, I would like you to meet my daughter, Hanabi, and my grandfather, Hisashi. He introduced the two at the table. Not to be rude, but the Haika can be a little more original when it comes to names, right? Naruto asked, looking at him across the table. It had been over 2,000 years since he had been sealed and he was still hearing the same names. It was almost freaky. Before Neji could speak, Hanabi did. I know who you are. You're Naruto Uzumaki. She blurted out. When she did, both her father and grandfather were glad that they were the only ones in the cafeteria at that point. An outburst was just begging for the media to show up if someone else heard it. Before either one of them could reprimand her, Naruto smiled. And how do you know that, kid? He asked her with a smile, like it was amusing to hear her say that. She was so excited at the prospect of him there that she ignored the comment about her being little. I read about you the entire time. You're in my favorite books. She pulled out a book and showed it to him. He took it from her hands and read the title. The Tales of the Konoha 12, Vol. 2. He looked over at Neji and Hisashi. They put the stuff we did in print. He was stunned by that. Some of the stuff they had done wasn't pretty, especially during the war. Oh Kami, did this have the suicide wagon in it? They edited some of the material so it wasn't so graphic. Hisashi assured him. The series is actually a bestseller. Wow, really? I guess I should be flattered. He looked over at Hanabi. Which one is your favorite story? He asked her. I can't decide. They're all so good. She replied, annoyed by the fact. Every time she tried to pick her favorite, another story popped into her mind and argued how it should be her favorite. Then another popped in and then another and another until it was just a distracting mess inside her own head. Well then let's start simple. Do you like any of the stories with me in it? It was probably vain to ask such a thing, but he was curious about it. I like the one where you fought against pain in the center of Konoha. She looked at him with odd eyes. That must have been terrifying even though you kept fighting. Wow, she went straight for that. She must have thought that even though it was terrifying, it was still cool. That's not what he remembered. He could still see the destroyed village all around him when he thought about that fight. But she didn't want to hear that. I was more angry than scared, if I have to be honest, he admitted. Until he had talked to Nagato, he was full of anger at him for the loss of his sensei. Is the story of Team 7's first mission in there? He asked, changing the subject before things felt awkward. She shook her head. No, that's in the first book. But that's a good one. I can't wait to start training to be a shinobi, that way I can be just you, Mr. Naruto. She declared, making her father and grandfather look slightly uncomfortable. That's good to hear. He noticed the uncomfortable looks on Neji and Hisashi. What? Did I say something wrong? It's not that you said anything wrong, Lord Naruto, Hisashi told him. It's just that Hanabi's situation about becoming a shinobi is a bit unique. What do you mean by that? And don't call me Lord, he quickly added. Remember when I said the fact that Asari children didn't get anything from the father was in debate? Neji asked him. He nodded and the Haika continued. Usually, and has something called element 0 or naturally in them when they're born. A few days ago, Hanabi lost all of her. It was replaced with chakra, which only humans have had for the past 2,000 years. He connected the dots when he heard those words and realized what that meant. I caused that, didn't I? He asked quietly. He wasn't sure how he did, but he had a gut feeling that was his fault. Daddy, don't make it sound like he did something bad. Hanabi admonished her father. Besides, I'm going to be the first shinobi because of it, so it's all thanks to him. You will not have as much chakra as the other students, Hanabi. Remember that, Hisashi told her. So? If I can't use my chakra as much as they can, then I'll be just like Rock Lee. She declared. Naruto, who was in the midst of taking a drink, decided to offer a sacrifice to the spit-take gods. Thankfully he aimed towards the side and didn't hit anyone. As he coughed out the rest of the water, the others just stared at him. Sorry, but that was the first time I've ever had someone say that they wanted to be like Rock Lee. He was still having trouble comprehending it. What's wrong with Rock Lee? I've read about him. He was an amazing shinobi who could only barely use his chakra, so he focused completely on learning Taijutsu. And that was awesome, just awesome. Well, he knew what she was talking about, he had a leg up on her. I know about Rock Lee, I fought with him. Reading about Lee and personally knowing Lee are two completely different things, Hanabi, he told her in a matter-of-fact tone. It's one thing to read about how he acted, and it's another to see it in person. The number of times he had seen Lee go off was enough for him to lose count. I could probably imitate bushy brows when he started going on one of his rants. Bushy brows? Asked Hisashi. My own nickname for him, he answered shortly. Can you show us what Rock Lee was like? Hanabi asked. She had already met a living legend and now there was an opportunity to get a glimpse at what another legend was like. She wasn't about to let this opportunity pass. Naruto, on the other hand, wasn't so sure about that. That's probably not a good idea. Oh come on, please. She pleaded, hope shining in her eyes. He knew it was going to be a losing battle if he kept refusing. If he did, he was fairly certain that she would pull out the weapon that is in every woman's arsenal, the weapon that is to be feared and respected by men everywhere. Alright, but don't say I didn't warn you. He swallowed the food in his mouth, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. Then, he gave her what she wanted. I can see that you are all in the springtime of your youth. He shouted, opening his eyes. To honor your youthfulness, I will run 400 laps around the city in 5 minutes. If I cannot do that, I will do 5,000 push-ups with my hands tied together. And if I cannot do that, I will do 60,000 laps around the planet on my hands while blindfolded. And if I cannot do that, I will. Okay, we get the point. Please stop that now. Neji begged him while he was in mid-tirade. He was half afraid that the blonde would actually do those things if they let him continue. His daughter was glued to her seat, somewhere between fascination and horror at the sight. Just be glad I don't know how he managed to create the Kami-forsaken sunset, he said with a fox-like grin. He remembered when Lee had managed to make a group of hardened bandits surrender just by describing how youthful it was to have captured them and caused the sunset to happen. There had been some serious debate on whether or not he should have been in the interrogation unit for that trick alone. Guy put his foot down and said no at that. Was Rock Lee really like that? Hanabi asked, stunned beyond belief. Well, she had read about what Lee was like, Naruto was right. It was completely different in real life. No, he was worse. He once tried to run 5 laps around the entire land of fire within 1 day, he told her. He managed to do it, but he ended up being unconscious for the next week and a half. The people who hadn't known Lee were amazed that he was that fast. The people who did know him were amazed that he had done something so stupid. Wow. She was awestruck by what she heard. On the one hand, if she could go back in time, she would do so in order to watch what Naruto had just described. On the other hand, she also kinda didn't want to because she would be freaked out and disturbed by what she saw. By the way, am I going to have to stay in the hospital today? The blonde asked Neji. Even though he had only been awake for a day, it already felt like he was about to go stir crazy. Add to the fact that the only thing he had seen for the first time in over 2,000 years was the inside of this hospital, and he had grounds. Truth be told, Neji had been expecting this question. But he had been expecting it a day later. Well, if you're up for it, it would probably be best if we took you clothes shopping. He looked pointedly at the 2 small tracksuit Naruto still wore. He glanced down too. Agreed, I don't think that I can wear these much longer. I think they're beginning to chafe. Then we'll go after we're done here with breakfast. The food on their plates was just about done anyways. Naruto was trying his hardest not to gawk at the buildings surrounding him as he, Neji, and Hanabi walked down the street. Kami, this is what an outsider must have felt like when they came into Konoha, he thought to himself. Although, Konoha feels like a small town compared to this place. The streets went everywhere and were filled with all sorts of different aliens. Some he knew, the others not so much. When he saw he had asked Neji what the hell a jellyfish was doing on land. For him, the best course of action was to keep his eyes straight and not give anyone weird looks, even though people were giving him odd looks because of his tracksuit. How far away is this store of yours, Neji? He asked Ahikta, deciding not to call him not Neji anymore. After all, his Neji was dead and had been for a long time. It should be nearby. Don't worry. This shop has been able to help Shinobi find the right clothes for the job ever since we started coming here, he assured the blonde. I hope so, I think my rear is about to show itself to the public. The pants were beginning to feel tight across his ass and he was half afraid of a tear because that was something he needed right now, a pair of 2 small pants ripping open in the middle of the street. They kept walking and they kept passing other people. Most were still giving him odd looks, but some of them and humans, both male and female, which was something that made him a little nervous, were trying to undress him with their eyes. All they'd have to do is wait for one rip to happen and they'll see everything. He mentally complained. He would have felt flattered if he wasn't so worried about not making a scene. Streaking naked through crowds was not something he really wanted to do. And here we are, Neji declared as they stood outside a store. The sign was in an alien language, so Naruto couldn't read it. Great, more languages I'll have to learn, he silently groaned. The door was open and people would walk either in or out, so he could tell that it was a popular place. They walked in. Before Naruto could take in the size and scope of the place, only able to note it was big, and with a name tag walked up to them. Welcome to Fashion Galaxy. She greeted them with a smile that made Naruto blush a little. How may we help you? Hello, Alenia, Neji greeted her, reading the name tag. My friend here needs a new set of clothes. He gestured over at Naruto, who was the center of attention due to the small tracksuit he was wearing. "Oh my," she said as she looked him over in a professional way. "What happened to Athena's name?" "Laundry accident. The rest of my clothes were set on fire and this one shrunk on me within 5 minutes of putting it on," he lied, straight-faced. It helped that his eyes were covered by the shades. The looks on people around him had all the same expression. They believed him. His story sounded too ridiculous to be a fake one. "Then you've come to the right place. Please follow me." She turned and walked into the store. Naruto turned to look briefly at Neji, who motioned him to follow her, and went after her. They walked deeper into the store, passing multiple racks of clothes. They were so far in, he lost sight of the entrance. "Do you have a preferred brand of clothing, sir?" she asked as they walked. Not really, no," he answered. He was guessing that the brands he knew were non-existent in this day and age. "I see." He could hear the disdain creeping into her voice. He was guessing that she was something of a fashion freak and was a little annoyed that he wasn't really helping her out. "Well, in that case, we'll make it easy for you." She somehow managed to make that sound like an insult. She changed course, turning to the right. When she stopped, she told him, "The changing rooms are over there." She gestured to where the changing rooms were, up against the wall. Inside each room is a Vi who can help you with picking out the clothes you desire. "Thanks, Alenia," he told her with a smile that made her blush a little and lose her condensation. He walked into one of the changing rooms, closing the door behind him. Because of store policy, she had to wait until he was done in case he needed an opinion or a suggestion. As she was a professional, she didn't say anything. She waited as the minutes passed, turning into a half hour, listening to the taping in the room and the mutterings that came with it. While she waited, Neji and Hanabi, who had done a little shopping themselves, walked up. "I take it he's in there?" Neji asked her. The sound of Naruto trying to get out of his clothes and sandals was enough. The sounds kept going for another good 2 minutes, getting more frustrated as time went on. "Oh, this isn't going anywhere," they heard Naruto all but growl inside the room. "Hey Neji, are you out there?" he shouted through the door. How did he know that he was out here? "I'm right here," he answered. "Good. Do me a favor and hold on to these." A hand appeared at the bottom. It held a pouch, a white swirl with a red tassel inserted on one side, a holster that looked like it still had stuff inside, and the bandages that held the holster. Neji took the items and the hand swiftly disappeared. They soon heard the sound of a kunai tearing through clothes. Alenia stared at the room, stunned. "Is he cutting himself out of his clothes?" she asked. She had seen that the clothes were small on him, but she had thought he would have been able to get out of them without destroying them. "It sure does sound like it," Hanabi chirped cheerfully. Actually, that sounded kinda cool. Would that be something she would have to do as a shinobi? "Hey daddy, when we're done here, can we go over to that electronics store?" she asked. "I want to see if that new album from Bige comes out yet." "We might, Hanabi," he told her. "It kinda depends on our friend in the changing room." They looked over at the door, where they could hear the muffled sounds of someone tapping a keyboard or screen. It sounded like it was getting more and more agitated. "Kami took it, I said functional, not fashionable, you stupid machine." Naruto suddenly shouted, making everyone who was in hearing distance almost jump away in surprise. "There's a difference." Everyone looked at the changing room and then at the nearby human like he was responsible. Sorry about that," Neji said with a strained smile. "He gets a little excited sometimes." While the others just scowled in their direction, Alenia just gave them a strained smile as well. After that little outburst, they spent the next half hour in silence. There were no more outbursts from the changing room, just the muffled taping. The other people in the shop didn't pay any more attention to them, they went about their business, picking out articles of clothing, looking at them, and possibly buying them. "Okay, I'm coming out," Naruto announced, getting the attention of Neji, Hanabi, and Alenia. He opened the changing room door and stepped out. Alenia's breath hitched as she stared at the blonde standing in front of her. "Goddess, he's handsome," she thought to herself. The tracksuit and the sandals that made him look odd and slightly comedic were gone, they could see the remains of those on the ground behind him. Naruto now wore a black turtleneck shirt over his torso. On his right sleeve, going from his shoulder to the end of the sleeve, was a thick orange-colored stripe. Instead of sandals, he wore steel-toed combat boots. He also wore black cargo pants, which had a black belt encircling the waist. The belt's buckle was the leaf sigil of Konoha, shined so it looked like silver. From the knee down, the pants had a design of a fire encircling the entire bottom half of the pants leg. Both the color of the fire and the stripe on his shirt were the same color, that of an orange that you could only find if you looked at a fire. He wore fingerless gloves on his hands that had metal plates sewn into it. All in all, he cut an impressive figure. "Well, how do I look?" he asked, spreading his arms slightly. The shirt was slightly skin-tight, so his muscles could be seen somewhat. It was also tucked into the pants, making it appear almost seamless. If one looked, they could see where the shirt ended and the pants began. You look really cool. Hanabi declared with a big grin. But it's missing something, I'm not sure what. She looked him up and down, trying to figure out what he was missing. I think I know what it is. He took the items he gave to Niji back. With practiced ease, he wrapped the bandages around his leg and reattached the holster over them. He put the pouch where it belonged, on the back of his pants. He held the swirl in his hands for a brief moment, looking at it and considering it, before gently putting it in one of the cargo pockets. He turned back to the changing room, where the remains of his former clothes were. He grabbed the kunai lying there in one of the sleeves. With a few quick cuts, he had separated a long strip from the rest of it and tied it around his forehead, creating a bandana. Better? He asked Hanabi, putting the kunai away. She gave him 2 thumbs up. Much better, she declared. Well, that's good to know. It actually felt a little better to have that feeling back on his head, minus the weight of the metal plate. During his fight against Obito, his headband had somehow been knocked off his head, he still wasn't sure how that happened. He didn't have the time to look for it, and he had to reluctantly admit there was a good chance of it being lost or destroyed. But that wasn't something he could lament about. As he came out of his musings, he noticed that Alenia was staring at him with a look of wonder and a little lust. Is something the matter? He asked her. No. Nothing's the matter, nothing. She hastily assured him. He wasn't quite sure about that. He had seen that kind of look before. While it had originally started after he had defeated pain, it really became common during the war. Girls would keep looking at him like that, but he had never really taken notice of it, mostly because there was always something to do and he didn't really have time to stop and wonder what was up with him. Okay, if you say so. He turned to look at Niji. Are you going to pay for this? He shook his head. No, the Alliance will foot the bill. But what do you want to do with the remains of your old clothes? We'll take care of them, Alenia assured them. Fashion Galaxy has a policy of recycling old clothes to make new ones, so there's no need to worry. Thank you, Naruto said, tearing his gaze away from the remains. While he was glad to be out of them, those clothes reminded him of days with his friends. And he didn't want to remember those days right now. It was still painful. Well, I'm good here, he told Niji. Are you sure? Yeah, if I need any more clothes, I'll just get them later. He looked over at the saleswoman. Thanks for helping me out, Alenia, he said gratefully. She blushed and avoided eye contact, mumbling about how it wasn't a problem. They left the store, with many people watching the blonde as they went. It was weird, but Naruto tried not to think about it. I hope you don't mind, but Hanabi wants to check something out in the electronics store, Niji asked as they walked back out onto the street. It's the store just down there. He pointed out the store down the street. It looked a little smaller than Fashion Galaxy. It's not a problem, he assured him. They walked down the street and into the electronics store. Hanabi all but lit up when they walked in. She quickly went deeper into the store, despite the protest from her father. You go after her. I'll just stay near the front, Naruto told him. He nodded with gratitude and went after her. The blonde looked around the store and saw something that caught his eye. He walked over to what looked like the video section, although it didn't look like any videotapes were there. He reached out and picked up a case. On the front of the case were 2 actors who suspiciously looked like Hashirama Senju and Madara Uchiha standing together over the beginning of Konoha. I see you found the 12th season of Shinobi, I said to him as he walked up to him, his breath hissing between words. That is one of the more famous seasons, as it has to deal with the final days of the clan wars and the creation of Konohagakure. Are you interested in buying it? Oh, no, I was just looking, he answered, still surprised that his village's past had become something to watch. Can you tell me more about this series? He asked. I would have thought you'd know more about me, sir. After all, it's a part of your history. I've been a little out of touch, and I've never really paid attention to what others thought was good on TV, he lied. It was true, for the most part. At first, he never had enough money to buy a TV, and by the time he could, there were more important things to worry about. Well, the series has been well received and has also won numerous awards. When it first began, the series creators wanted to stay true to the history of the shinobi as closely as possible, a procedure that has followed into the current season. Where in the history of shinobi did this series begin? He asked, now genuinely curious. If I remember correctly, the first season began with the grandfathers of the founders of Konohagakure. It took them that long to get from the grandfathers to the actual founders themselves. They saw his confusion and quickly explained it. What I mean to say is that was the time period in which they began. The series doesn't just focus on one group of shinobi. It focuses on all of them, going from father to son and from clan to village. That's a part of what makes it so good. It shows the different views the characters have on situations, as well as the troubles that haunted them. Multiple stories are being told at the same time, and they're intertwined. You'd think that would have ended when it got to the creation of the hidden villages, but it did the opposite. More of them were created. Can you tell me what season they're on now? If it had gotten to when he was alive, he would be nervous. If I remember correctly, the 19th season is currently in production. It should pick up at the end of the Third Shinobi World War. Thank Kami, I have time, he thought to himself. That was comforting. Do they actually have chakra in this series? When they could, the salesman answered. If there is something that needs to be used and the actor cannot do it, special effects take care of the problem. Wait, the actors can use chakra? He was honestly surprised by that. When he was younger, only shinobi and samurai utilized chakra. They nodded. That's one of the interesting things about the series. They use actual shinobi stationed on or around Earth to fill in the roles and clan members to be their ancestors. It's quite ingenious on their part. You sound like a fan, he remarked. Maybe it was because he was still getting used to this new time, but that was surprising. Many non-humans are fans of this series. It was already in its third season when the Alliance joined the galactic community. It allowed many of us to see where a part of your race came from and what their ancestors did. And I'm guessing it was the only way your scientists studied chakra. Niji had briefed him about that part of galactic politics as they made their way into the city. He would have to be careful about what he did, at least around scientists. Luckily, he had been around enough of them to know what they look like in any species. I don't know about that, but I do know that some scientists are fans of the show. So, will you be buying it? No, I won't. He put the case back. I think I'd best start with the first season and I don't see it here. They nodded apologetically. Yes, unfortunately, we have run out of stock for that season. I apologize for the trouble. There's no trouble. Thank you for helping me out. It was my pleasure, sir. He turned around and walked away. As he made his way back over to the entrance, Naruto saw Niji and Hanabi coming back towards him. Hey, did you find what you were looking for? He asked. Unfortunately, no we didn't. The album Hanabi was looking for hasn't been released yet. Niji replied. Oh, sorry, Hanabi, he told her with an apologetic smile. She had seemed to be looking forward to it when they came in. It's okay. With any luck, it'll come out before I leave for Earth, she said with a smile. What was the album you wanted? He asked as they walked back onto the street. He was kinda curious about what kind of music was played in this era. It's the newest album of my absolute favorite band, Bijk, she declared happily. It's called Double Down. If he hadn't stopped walking when he heard that, he would have walked into a wall. There's a band called Bijk? He asked in stunned wonder. Yeah, the Masters of Rock. And yes, that includes Doton. Huh? That just flew right by him. Niji smiled. It's an old joke about the band, he told the blonde. Don't worry about it. His daughter was more focused on the fact that the legend beside her didn't know about her favorite band. They're the hottest band out there. And the cool thing is that they're a mixture of races. They've got Solarians, humans and even Naruto didn't say anything. He was still too stunned to say a word. It was becoming a bit of a concern for her. Daddy, I think I broke him, she told her father. More than 2,000 years ago, they were spoken in fear and whispers. Now, they're a music group, Naruto said, mostly to himself. I honestly don't know if I should laugh at that or not. Hey, don't laugh. They're a great group. She told him vehemently, shaking her fist at him. She wouldn't punch him. She just wanted to emphasize her point. Sorry, I'll stop. Kami, you definitely live to your name, Hanabi, he said with a grin infectious enough to make the other two in the group smile. Anyway, is there a library nearby? He asked Niji, the grin sliding off his face as he became serious again. Why do you need a library? Haika asked. He knew that Naruto was not a fan of books, so the fact that he was asking for a library was a little odd. I am way behind on the times. I need to catch up, he answered simply. He wouldn't be a shinobi if he didn't do some research. That was a fact that was almost literally beaten into his skull. They took an air cab to the biggest library in the city, the Cerise Republic Library. This place is huge. Naruto thought to himself in amazement. The moment they walked into the place they could see the full majesty of the library. The place looked like it had at least 5 floors, possibly even more. The layout was a rising circular design, going upwards in a spiral if a person wanted to use the stairs. Books lined the shelves and the shelves were everywhere. The only place the books weren't at was the center, an empty space that projected upwards to the ceiling. He gawked for a moment longer before coming back to his senses and walked over to the front desk. That was the gate he needed to pass before he got into the library. Excuse me, can I help you? The librarian sitting at the desk asked them. Yes, can you tell me where your history and culture books are? Naruto asked her. There was a lot of stuff he needed to know, but it was best if he started off slow, relatively speaking. What history and culture are you looking for, sir? Human? Turian? Asari? She asked in reply. All. When she heard that answer, she didn't know what to say. Everyone who came into the library to this day had a specific race in mind. All. Are you asking for the entire history and the entire culture of all the races in the known galaxy? Yes. She would have thought that he was joking, except for the serious look on his face. Plus, the sunglasses he wore made him look a little intimidating. It was best to keep him happy. Oh okay, the history books are on the right side of the 3rd floor and the culture books are on the left side of the 5th floor. Is that everything, sir? Yes, thank you. He walked away from the desk and rejoined Neji and Hanabi. Right, here we go, he said to himself, taking a deep breath. He crossed his hands into a hand seal. Taj Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, multiple shadow clone jutsu. He whispered under his breath. The entire front area of the library was engulfed in smoke, surprising many of the people there. When the smoke cleared, if one was to go down from a higher floor, they would have seen a lot of yellow near the front door. Whoa, both Neji and Hanabi thought as they stared at the sheer number of clones. They had read about that, but to see it themselves was something else. Neji could make a few clones himself, but nothing like this. Alright, you all heard what she said, Naruto addressed 1,000 clones standing before him. Half of you will take the history books, and the other half will take the culture books. Once you're done with your book, dissipate. When you feel one of you dissipate, wait at least 5 minutes before trying to dissipate yourself. And remember to keep it down, you're in a library. The clones nodded in acknowledgement and walked away, filling the library with sounds of many feet hitting the floor. If they were less polite, they would have taken to the walls to get there fast. As they went up the stairs, the original turned around and walked out of the library, despite the stunned looks he was getting. Both Neji and Hanabi quickly followed him. Hey, I thought you said that you needed to know what's gone in the past 2,000 years, Hanabi said to him as they quickly walked down the stairs. I did, I just didn't say how I was going to catch up, he replied. They walked around a corner, out of sight from the main street. Can anyone see us? He asked, coming to a stop. No, she answered, looking around and seeing no one else in sight. Good. He would have collapsed onto the ground right then and there if he hadn't placed a hand on the nearby wall to support him. His breath became a lot wheezier as he struggled to get it back. Naruto, are you okay? Neji asked, surprised but concerned. He didn't think the legend would react like that. He went to his side to help him stay up. Just give me a minute, he replied, waving away his help. His legs weren't going to collapse on him, but they felt weak. My chakra isn't all completely back. Summoning those clones doesn't usually make me this winded. The wheezing in his breath soon faded as he managed to find the strength to stand without support again. Okay, I'm a little better now. Are you sure? He wasn't angry at the question. He knew the man was only checking. Of course, I'm sure. I think I'd know if I was not okay. He walked back onto the main street. I'm hungry, anybody else hungry? He asked, changing the subject before either one of them could start bothering him about it. I am a little hungry too, Hanabi admitted. It was almost noon anyway. Then let's find the nearest food joint and get eating. He declared. Naruto, was that all you wanted to do today? Neji asked for clarification. Pretty much, why? The blonde asked, looking back at him. I have a message from Admiral Hackett. He wants to see you as soon as you're able. What's an admiral? He thought it was something that had to do with the sea, but he wasn't sure. Neji knew how to translate it for him. He's a Jnin, Naruto, a high-ranking one. It was his decision to have you unsealed, so he would naturally want to see how you've been doing. I see. Okay, I'll go with this guy. But first things first, we are having food. He walked off with both Hanabi and Neji behind him. Thankfully, he had decided to walk in the direction of where the restaurants were. After enjoying a good lunch, where Naruto stared off into the distance every 5 minutes as he processed new information, they dropped Hanabi back off at the hospital so her grandfather and mother could keep an eye on her. Both Naruto and Neji then went to the spaceport. They first walked so Naruto could keep processing the information. Once the last clone had dissipated, they took an air cab and arrived at their location shortly afterwards. So, this Admiral guy is waiting for me nearby? Naruto asked as they walked through the spaceport. Some of the aliens who were there glanced their way, mostly to look at Naruto, who was unaware of the looks, but most just generally ignored them. Yes, he's waiting in the port administrator's office. He wanted some privacy when talking to you, Neji answered him. The office should be just up ahead. From what he heard, rank was used and the administrator had to obey. They kept walking until they found the port administrator's office. 2 guards stood outside the door. When they saw Naruto walking up to them, they went stiff as boards, but their faces were full of stunned awe. The Admiral is just inside, sir, one of the guards told the blonde, managing to find his voice. He'll want to see you alone. Alright, wish me luck, he said to Neji before walking to the door, which opened automatically for him. Man, that's weird. He thought to himself as he entered the office, the door closing behind him. Was he ever going to get used to automatic doors? Hackett turned away from the window when he heard the door close and faced the blonde. "Naruto Uzumaki, as I live and breathe," he said. "I don't think I would ever have the pleasure of meeting you." The way he spoke wasn't stunned or awed. It was simple and to the point, like the legendary blonde was just another person he was meeting. "I don't think I would have ever had the pleasure of waking up over 2,000 years in the future," Naruto replied, his tone slightly sarcastic. He couldn't help it. "Would it foolish to hope that you people have managed to come up with a good way of traveling to the past?" He shook his head. "No, we haven't. It was generally agreed not to see if we could, due to the chance of unforeseen consequences if we could do it. The number of stories written about the idea was certainly a good factor." "Yeah, I can see why you'd all say. But still." He stared past the admiral and out the window. He could make out the city through the window. It was amazing but strange. And it was nothing like he wanted to see at the moment. It's a nice thought. Perhaps, but that was a decision that was made long ago. He realized something as he briefly looked at the desk in the office. "I'm sorry. I would offer you a seat, but this is not my office." "That's alright. I'm used to standing when talking to my superiors. I apologized for taking my time getting here. I wanted to make sure I had gotten all the information from the library that I wanted." "Yes, Niji had informed me of what you did. Although I am a bit surprised, I would have thought that you would want all the information the library wanted." He could see the man's reasoning, but he still scowled. "Learning things by reading and studying have never been my thing. I find it's best to go slow. Besides, if I wanted to know everything the library had, you wouldn't see me for a week at best." Hackett. He suddenly realized his mistake. "Ah crap, I was supposed to call you Admiral or Jinin, wasn't I?" "It's fine," he said, waving it off. "I know you're used to addressing your superiors by their names. If you're more used to that, I will not hold it against you." "Thanks. Anyway, I wanted to know what I would be dealing with when it came to different people and races, so I had clones read every book they had on history and culture." Once again, he stared out the window. "I guess that old saying is true after all." "Which old saying would that be?" The admiral had heard many of them. "The more things change, the more they stay the same," he answered. "I had my friends seal me away so they could have peace, and yet that peace didn't last very long, did it? A war with 2 other continents took care of that." He now knew all about the War of 3 Flags. 3 continents fighting against each other just because they didn't like each other. It sounded about right for the human race. And the Unrakem massacre, the mere thought of it made him angry and sad. What would have happened if he had been there? Hackett wasn't going to let him stay in that frame of mind. The peace may have been disrupted, but it was your dream of peace that led to reconciliation after the war and brought it back. You are honored for a lot of things, Lord Naruto. The system's alliance is the way it is because of you. The shinobi force of the military now has a motto because of you." "They do?" He was honestly surprised by that. He nodded. "Never back down, always get back up." Naruto remembered those words quite clearly. They brought back a memory. "I said that to a kid in Suna once. He was a refugee. He had lost his parents and his little brother when Obito attacked his village. He was a part of the refugees camped out in the village. He asked why we kept fighting when it was so hopeless. I told him we're shinobi. We never back down, we always get back up." He was keeping it short because he had a feeling the admiral already knew the story. Plus, he didn't feel like going into detail. As it turned out, he was right. "That kid took your words to heart," Hackett said. "He became a shinobi and eventually became the Rakudame Kazukiage. He lived by those words, and it soon became the motto for the shinobi." He felt flattered by that. By the time he had ended the war, he had honestly felt that he hadn't done everything he could, that people would speak of him with nothing but distaste and disappointment in their voices. But to be known as the one who gave the shinobi a motto made him happy, in a small way. But he had to focus on the present. "Well, that's cool. I must ask what kind of mission the Alliance will put me on." Hackett's face went blank. "Mission? Why do you think you're being put on one?" He frowned at the admiral. "I'm not as stupid as I once was, Jinin Hackett. You wouldn't have broken the seal if the Alliance didn't want something of me. And I'm fairly certain it's not to entertain news reporters and take interviews, considering how no one has really found out about me." He had dealt with people wanting to interview him during the war, but he didn't have the time and he never wanted to. The blank expression faded away and was replaced with a small smile. "You would be correct, Naruto. The Alliance does have something special planned for you, but it all hinges on one thing." "And what's that?" "If you will rejoin the shinobi force and be a part of the Alliance military," he answered as he pulled something out from his pocket and held them out for the blonde to see. It was 2 metal tags on a metal chain. His name was inscribed on them, but that was all he could see due to the angle of the light shining down on them. "What are you talking about, rejoin the shinobi force?" he asked as he took the tags out of Hackett's hand. "I never left." He put the tags around his neck. They felt cool against his shirt. I thought you might say that. There is something else. He walked over to a small chest against the wall. Naruto hadn't realized that it was there. It looked old, and the way Hackett opened it, like it was something that meant something, he could tell that it was something important. After the Fourth Shinobi World War ended, the cages granted you the rank of Jonin in absentia and placed the flak jacket you were to be given inside the same chest where they kept the seal tag that would release you, Hackett told him as he pulled something out of the chest and held it out for the blonde to see. We've added a few things when you were freed, but it is still the same thing. Naruto looked down at the flak jacket in the Admiral's hands. He took it with gentle fingers. It was the same as he remembered. It was the same dark green color. The neck guard and extra shoulder padding were there, as well as the 3 scroll pouches on each of the front. The red crest of Yuzushi Agakure on the back almost made him cry with happiness. But as Hackett had said, there were a few added things. He had found a symbol on the neck guard which was 2 bars touching each other on one end and widened at the other, leaving space to fit in the picture of the earth. The symbol was done in silver and laid over a field of black. If he had to guess, it was the symbol of the Systems Alliance. On the shoulders, 2 black stripes separated the top portion. Inside the stripes were 3 black bars. What does that mean? He asked, pointing with his eyes at the bars. They signify your exact rank, a commander. There had been some arguments that he should have been given a higher rank, but the fact was they didn't know if he would be for it. This was the compromise. Do you accept this jacket and what all that it entails? The Admiral asked, using the same words the Hokage once used when promoting a shinobi to Jonin rank. Naruto looked at the jacket once more. He put it on slowly, not saying a word as he slipped his arms through. He reached down and zipped it up, letting the sound fill the air. When he was done, he stood there for a few moments, getting used to the flak jacket. It feels a little stiff and heavy. But I supposed I'll get used to it, he thought to himself. I accepted fully, Admiral. He threw a somewhat sloppy salute, only because he had only seen it and not tried it himself. Hackett returned the salute. It's good to have you, Commander. Secondary Codex, Humanity and the Systems Alliance. Culture. Fangirls. Not much can be said about the human group known as fangirls. Humans seem to see them with fear and terror. They also seem to run away and hide whenever they are nearby. Fangirls are a group of human females who seem to have only one thing in common, and that would be their worship of a single person, be it male or female. There is also a group called fanboys, who are usually discussed less by human males than the fangirls. They are known to have large pictures of their person of worship, or POW, in their rooms, emit a high-pitched noise when that POW is near, and also follow them wherever they go. They also know practically everything about the POW, bordering on the lines of watching them in their sleep, and apparently know where they are at all times. But according to sources, what is most feared about the fangirls is the fact that given the chance, they will gladly rape the POW. Though there are no reports of this ever actually succeeding, the POWs of fangirls are always paranoid about this fact. It also seems to be the main reason as to why they keep running every time the fangirls are near. Fangirls are known to worship many different people, but most seem to worship shinobi, some are even shinobi themselves, which makes the POW even more nervous. Rival clubs of fangirls have been known to have an intense hatred of one another, mostly because they worship someone else. At one time in human history, a conflict even broke out due to multiple clubs, see Fangirl War. While mostly feared for the reasons listed above, fangirls are also respected for their tenacity and seemingly endless stamina. They are also quick to anger if their POW is mocked or insulted and will quickly get rid of the offender. As one human ambassador once famously told the council, if humanity wanted to rule the galaxy, all we'd have to do is sick the fangirls on you. Chapter 6. Redefining the phrase old school. If a person had walked into the empty gym on the SSV Everest and they weren't a shinobi, they would have come across a peculiar sight. They would have seen Naruto, clad only in a pair of sweatpants and his shades, standing on his hands and concentrating on a leaf that was attached to his forehead. Every couple of minutes, he would slowly push down on his hands and then push back up. It was an exercise that tested his control over his body and over his chakra. Ever since he had accepted Hackett's offer and his new rank of lieutenant commander, though he still considered himself a Jonin, he had spent every waking moment getting his body back into its old fighting condition. He pushed himself every single day and more often than not, collapsed in exhaustion right on the spot when he was done. At first, he stayed on Thesha, but after he had met the Justiker and the two of them had managed to turn the exercise building they were in, which had been quite big, into what could only be described as a ruined warzone, the two of them swore that they were just sparring, but people found it hard to believe. It honestly looked more like a grudge match than simple sparring. It was generally agreed that he should stay on the Everest, where he was less likely to wreck things in such a grand fashion. He took offense at that as they made it sound like it happened on purpose. It had taken him about 2 weeks of training, but Naruto was mostly back to his old self. He was still rusty in a few places. During the war, he had been forced to teach himself how to use the Rasengan without a clone, and now, he was back to using the clone. Not to mention that it would still take some time until he would be able to use the more powerful in his arsenal, especially the one he had copied off of Sasuke. As he thought about that one, he remembered the time when he had demonstrated the Sasuke accused him of plagiarizing him. Even though he sounded serious during the entire argument, everyone knew that he actually wasn't and that it wasn't a real argument. In the end, he complimented Naruto in his own way on the it proved effective the few times he used it in the war. However, he was still adjusting to this new era. He still felt like an idiot whenever he went past and, even though others had assured him that he wasn't alone in that department, he was still having such a hard time navigating through both Everest and Cerise that he was beginning to consider getting a map. He was still trying to figure out how he ended up in the women's shower when he was looking for the cafeteria. Thankfully, he recognized his mistake quickly and got out of there before anyone saw him. When he could, he would pore over the dictionary, slowly learning the English language. The process included a great deal of repeating the words, sometimes butchering them badly, and a greater deal of swearing. It was tiring work for him. Satisfied with the exercise, Naruto lowered his feet back down to the ground. As he straightened himself, he took the leaf gently off of his forehead and looked at it. It was just an ordinary leaf he had picked off of a tree on Thesha, but that wasn't why he looked at it. He remembered the time Iruka had tried to teach him, Kiba, Shikamaru, and Shinji the same exercise he had just used, only for the 4 of them to blow him off. Kami, I was an idiot, he muttered to himself as he left the gym and entered the locker room. After a quick shower, he was out of the locker room in less than 10 minutes, clad again in his normal clothes. The minute he was out, a genin was waiting for him. He knew that the shinobi had a more specific rank, but he also knew no one was going angry about calling him a genin. Sir, the genin saluted him, which he returned. He got better at it out of necessity. Admiral Hackett wants to see you ASAP. Alright, lead the way please, he replied, lowering the salute. The genin nodded. They started walking down the hallway with the genin in the lead. As they walked through the ship, they would pass people in the corridors who gave Naruto a brief nod of acknowledgement. When he had first come aboard, the crew members could look at him with stunned wonder. They loosened up slightly after he told a new enlisted member that if he kept that look up, it would freeze on his face, making everyone in hearing range laugh. They soon got into an elevator and rode in silence. It stopped once and 2 soldiers walked in when the door opened. They barely acknowledged the other 2 in the elevator. They looked tired. They must have gotten off shift. Did you hear? The guy on the left said. He was wearing an engineer's uniform. The guy on the right shook his head. What? It seems like the Niners got wind of why we're here. He groaned, rubbing his forehead. Who talked? You really think I know? You're the one who told me, hero. Just spreading the word around, Angus. He stopped rubbing his forehead. I just hope that we get out of here before they do. The last thing we need is them showing up. Hero nodded. The last thing Lord Naruto needs are the Niners showing up. He'll get drowned by them. Naruto waited until the 2 left before he looked at the genin guiding him. Are they really that bad? He asked. He had heard a few things about the Church of the Nine since he woke up and what he heard wasn't comforting. The genin didn't know how to exactly answer that. On the one hand, it was a religion based on the legend beside him. On the other hand, the Church of the Nine didn't have the most stellar of records in the galaxy. You'd have to meet them yourself, my lord. Oh boy, he thought to himself. That was not an answer he liked. He was trying to keep his opinion open about these churches, but what he was hearing wasn't making them sound appealing. As the elevator pinged and the doors opened to the requested deck, the genin stepped out, and so did Naruto. I can find my way from here, the blonde told him, who nodded and saluted him again before walking away. He quickly found the admiral's office and knocked on the door before walking in. Hackett, he greeted the admiral. Hackett was focused on his computer for a moment longer before he looked. Commander, he returned the greeting. Even though he let the blonde get away with calling him by his name, he also cautioned him that other high-ranking officers will not allow him to do that. He noticed how distracted he seemed. Everything alright? The ship's been seeing some odd readings just within our scanning range. But every time we've tried to investigate further, the readings disappear. Sounds like someone's playing peekaboo with you. Not just me, but Thesha too. He had already gotten reports from the republics that they had gotten the same readings and were having the same problems identifying it. But that wasn't why he called the blonde here. Please come in, take a seat. He waited in silence as the blonde sat down. I've heard that you've recovered all of your former strength. Most of my strength, Naruto corrected him. There was still stuff he needed to work on. But if you're asking me if I'm capable of completing missions, the answer would be yes. Why? What's going on? There's no use beating around the bush, the admiral thought to himself. I'll be honest with you, Naruto. Ever since you've awoken, there have been doubts about your abilities to function in the modern day. He frowned at those words. Were these doubts started by that matriarch in the hospital? Every time he passed Dr. Moria, she always looked at him with skepticism and disbelief, as well as a slight hatred. He didn't know why she was like that, he had been polite to her every time they met. Yes, but others are starting to believe it too after you had that day regarding armor and weapons, he pointed out. Flashback. What in the name of Kami is this? Naruto asked as he looked into the barrel of a pistol. He was in a shooting gallery on Thesha with some of Everest's soldiers. He had been brought down to the gallery in order to get acquainted with modern-day weaponry and armor. There were some aliens in the gallery, but the majority of the people there were humans. Commander, don't do that. A nearby soldier all but screamed when he saw what the blonde was doing. He jerked his eye away from it, reacting on instinct. What? You made a sound like my head's going to get blown off or something. That's exactly what would happen. That's where the bullet comes out. Oh, right, got it. Stay from the hole in the thingy. He lowered the gun away from his face but still looked at it. So this is a projectile thrower? He asked a nearby Chunin, a middle-aged man with more gray hair than black, turning the pistol over in his hands, with an expression of confusion and amazement on his face. The soldiers looked at him oddly. I haven't heard someone put it like that. But yes, that's basically it, the Chunin replied. Most of the soldiers there would have found the situation funny if it had been any other person. But they were dealing with a man who was from a time where kunai and shuriken were the main choice of weapons. Those same weapons were still in use today, but were mostly used for either a distraction or close-quarter combat. And I just point and pull this trigger to fire it. He held the gun the way they had shown him, pointing it at the Chunin, making the others duck. Yes, Commander. But please point that at the target and not us, the Chunin all but begged, pointing at the row of targets. They were a row of target dummies that had enough armor on to generate a kinetic barrier, which could be turned on or off manually. Oops, sorry about that, he apologized, swinging the gun back around to the targets. The aliens in the room snickered at the sight of the blonde. Unlike the humans, they definitely found the situation funny. While some of the soldiers scowled at them, the blonde did not. He held the gun the way he had been shown, focused on the target, and pulled the trigger. The shot rang out, but the kick had caught him by surprise, making him swing his arms up. As a result, the bullet flew over the target and buried itself in the wall. The gallery was completely silent. I'm guessing I did it wrong, didn't I? The blonde asked sheepishly. The snickering turned into full-blown laughter when he said that. You find this funny? A genin who looked to be barely in his 20s demanded, glaring at a nearby. A little bit, yes, they answered, trying hard not to grin. The genin looked like he wanted to slug right there, but stopped when Naruto spoke. Yeah, it's always funny until someone gets hurt. Like an inexperienced novice who gets mad at the laughter directed at him and tries to prove that he can do it, only to injure someone, the new commander remarked in a casual tone. The laughter disappeared after he said that. They weren't sure if he was threatening them or not. I'm just saying, he told them after seeing the looks on their faces. Will you try again, sir? The Chunin asked him. He, along with the rest of the soldiers, almost desperately wanted him to shut the aliens up. The majority reason was so he could prove to the aliens that he wasn't a joke or an idiot. No, I won't right now. I'll probably do it later when there isn't much of a crowd. His shaded eyes glanced over to the aliens in the gallery. Plus, I don't think we need another spectacle like when I tried to put that armor on. He grimaced. Fair enough, sir. He had been there in the armory earlier when Naruto was first introduced to the modern armor. It had taken him 45 minutes to put on the set they had given him. Backwards. The soldiers there, which included Neji and Captain Anderson, as well as Urzi and Mora, tried to hold back their laughter, but when he asked if he had put it on right, they lost it and fell to the ground howling. That's a no, isn't it? Naruto had asked. After they were done laughing, Naruto went back into the locker room and spent another 45 minutes getting it on right. But even after he came out wearing it correctly, it still felt wrong on him. It felt stiff and heavy. When he tried to move, he felt clumsy and bulky. Considering that he was wearing the lightest type they had, the idea of creating a custom design for him started to be discussed. He surprised them by telling them flat out he wasn't going to wear any kind of armor unless it was absolutely necessary. When Moria asked him with a condescending smile what he would when the bullet started to fly, he looked her straight in the eye and asked if the ideas of ducking and or finding cover had ever occurred to the Asari, or did they just paint a big target on themselves in battle so their enemies knew where to look. To avoid a fight, both Neji and Anderson suggested he go down to the shooting gallery and be shown how to shoot a gun. You'll have to wear armor if you go to a planet or a moon that has no breathing atmosphere or no atmosphere, Commander, one of the samurais told the blonde. And I'll wear it if and when it comes to that. Until then, I'm staying in my clothes, thank you, he replied. Moria walked into the gallery just as he finished talking, so she heard the last part. And how exactly will you utilize a weapon rack if you do not have armor on? She asked him, still smiling condescendingly. Instead of getting angry at her tone, he chose to focus on the other thing. He was confused by it. What's a weapon rack? He asked the Chiknin. It's what allows you to place your weapons on the back of your armor or your side, sir, he answered patiently. He had been training soldiers long enough to be used to stupid questions. Ah, I see. Pass then, he declared. The soldiers weren't really surprised by his words, but the smile on Moria's face became even more condescending, if that was possible. Then you will be weaponless in the field. Not even your precious chicory would save you every time. She butchered the word on purpose, trying to get a raise out of the humans. The soldiers were offended, but Naruto refused to let it work on him. The word is chakra, ma'am, and you never know what it can do, he told her, with complete seriousness. Besides, I'm not weaponless. That's what these are for. He pulled out a kunai and a shuriken, showing them to her. When he had first come aboard Everest, he had been given a new set of kunai and shuriken from the armory. He didn't pay attention to most of the details about them when they were explained. All he needed to know was that they were sharper, lighter, and less likely to rust than what he had last. Those? She let out a harsh laugh. No one joined her as everyone, aside from Naruto, had remembered watching the new report about her infamous remark and the Alliance's reply. How could you possibly harm whatever enemies you have with knives? He turned to face the target without saying a word to her. Without any warning of any kind, his hands blurred as he reached into his holster and pouch, pulled out both kunai and shuriken, and threw them at the target. The gallery was filled with the sound of the blade spinning through the air, as well as the thuds of them hitting the target. Both human and alien watched in stunned silence as he threw kunai after kunai and shuriken after shuriken at the target. Finally, when he was done, everything he had thrown at the target had either struck a fatal area or an area where it was most painful. He turned to face Moria. Like that, he told her, pointing at the target. She was stunned, but she quickly clamped down on it, putting a sneer on her face. Oh yes, most impressive. You attacked a target dummy that didn't even have its shields on. Your enemies won't give that kind of luxury. He gave her an annoyed look and rolled his eyes. He walked towards the dummy and pulled out all the kunai and shuriken, placing them back in the holster and pouch. He walked back to where he originally stood, found the button that activated the shield and flipped it. He took a deep breath and clasped his hands together as if he was praying. His chakra flared to life in his hands and he brought them down to his sides. Again, his hands blurred as he threw kunai and shuriken at the target. But this time, they didn't hit the target. They tore through it. When he was done, the dummy had holes in the exact same spots he had thrown the first time, and everything he had thrown was embedded in the wall behind the dummy. Everyone stared at the dummy like they couldn't believe what they had just seen. Like that, Naruto told Moria in the same tone of voice, pointing at the target again. Then flashback. Boy did that story go around fast. It was like everywhere Naruto turned he was hearing it. Sheesh, you use a little Pton chakra to prove a point and they never let you hear the end of it, the blonde groaned. Perhaps you shouldn't have used Pton chakra, Hackett pointed out blandly. You had proven your point the first time. It didn't feel like it the way she kept talking. Moria was the one matriarch he interacted with the most. She wasn't giving him a good opinion of the rest of them. And there was also the time we introduced you to the Omni tool. That was a day the Admiral was never going to forget. He already had a feeling that it was a story to be told over drinks at a bar. He scowled. I still maintain this thing is stupid, he declared as he brought his Omni tool into visual sight. The day they had tried to explain to him how the Omni tool operates, it had led to an argument. Finally they asked how he would get past a locked door that could only be opened by using an Omni tool. He said he would kick the door down. When asked if the door was reinforced, he said he would shove a Rasengan at it. If the door was reinforced to withstand such he would find another way to get in. And if there wasn't any other way to get in, he'd kick the door. He thought he was making a very simple point. The rest of the people thought the conversation was repetitive. The argument continued for another half hour. They finally managed to convince him to wear it so he could keep track of any money he had. He had been stunned by the fact that money was mostly handled electronically. And how do you even get this thing to go away? Naruto demanded, shaking his arm like he was trying to fling the Omni tool off. Hackett would have found the scene a little amusing if it had been anyone else. You do it like so. He showed the blonde the motion and he repeated it. Thanks. He leaned back in the chair. So what exactly did you guys have in mind to prove them wrong? If I have to do a written test, I am going to flat out refuse. His memories of the written tests in the academy and the Chunin exam still haunted him. He had slightly less distaste for the reports he had to write, but only slightly, mostly because Tsunade gave him a very hairy eyeball when he got stubborn. He shook his head. No. It was decided that you would be tested in a live fire exercise against the best 20 Asari commando groups on Thessia. That got the blonde's attention. "How many commandos are there in a group?" he asked. He had heard a few things about the Asari commandos. Until the shinobi arrived on the galactic stage, they were the best, the elite of soldiers. But ever since the reports of shinobi in action filtered out to the rest of the galaxy, there's been tension between the two groups. Although no one said it aloud, many were interested in seeing representatives of the two groups go at each other. Now they had that opportunity, with a legendary shinobi no less. "From what I've been told, the average is about 5 commandos in a group. So you're sending me up against 100 supposedly elite Asari soldiers," he said, making sure he got the facts right. Hackett nodded. "Kinda unfair, isn't it?" "I'm sure you will manage," the admiral replied, albeit with a small smile on his face. He knew what the legendary shinobi was thinking. Location: Thessia. Everyone waited in a clearing that was on the outskirts of a forest. Moria and Erzia stood waiting on one side with the 20 commando groups behind them. They were checking their weapons, making sure everything was good to go. On the other side of the clearing, Hackett, Anderson, and Niji along with a small retinue of guards stood there, facing the. Naruto was behind them, doing some last-minute checks on his gear. He had no guns on him, not even a pistol. The commandos didn't think too highly of him for that. Anderson saw the scorn in their eyes. As much as he wanted to say something, his professionalism kept him silent. It was only when he heard the last kunai holstered that he dared to open his mouth. "Are you ready, Commander?" "As ready as I'll ever be." Naruto walked forward to the empty ground between the two groups. "Afternoon, ladies," he greeted the commandos. They looked at him with blank expressions until one of them turned and said something to the others, making them giggle and laugh, while both Erzia and Mora rolled their eyes. "I don't know about the rest of the galaxy, but on Earth it's not really polite to talk about someone while they're right in front of you," he told them pointedly. "Oh, I am sorry," the one who had spoken said without an ounce of apology in her voice. "We were just wondering if the supposed legend was ready." The giggling and laughing got louder. They couldn't really believe that this blonde who looked like he was barely out of his diaper to them was some kind of legend to shinobi. "Yeah, I'm ready. But I still think that this whole thing is kinda unfair," he remarked. "Oh, is the little human afraid of the big scary Asari commandos?" she asked in a childish voice, making the others laugh even harder. To them, this exercise was a joke. Even Moria was smiling at the idea, Erzia was not. "How about we give you a 10-second head start? That way you might actually hope you have a chance." He didn't say anything. He just stared at them in silence. The laughter died down as the commandos began to feel unnerved by his unflinching stare. It was like he was staring into the depth of their souls and they couldn't stare back. Finally, he gave them a very fox-like grin. "For future reference, you really shouldn't have said that," he said cheerfully. He looked to the forest. "Time to play the game." Then he took off, disappearing into the forest. The commandos were surprised by his actions but couldn't do anything about it as they now had to wait 10 seconds before they could go after him. The 10 seconds moved slowly for them. When time was finally up, they charged into the forest, breaking into their respective groups and scattering. After the last commando disappeared into the thickness of the woods, the two groups faced each other. "Care for a little wager, gentlemen?" Moria asked the humans. "We have a few bets on which group beats your shinobi. Would you like to place a bet on who will win?" They shared a look in silence. 100 credits say Naruto wins, Hackett finally said. 500 says he wins only using Kage Bunshin, Niji replied. This got everyone else placing bets on how the blonde would win. Not a single human placed a bet on the commandos. The jeweled fist commandos moved deeper into the woods, staying alert. Eresa, the leader, kept her shotgun aimed forward while two others watched their flanks and the last two watched their rear. "Anybody see him?" she asked. "No," answered the commando in the rear, her assault rifle steady in her hands. She saw an easy solution to it, but it was restricted. A restriction that annoyed her. "Remind me why we're not using the radar to find him." "Because Matriarch Moria told us not to, so we could give the poor human a sporting chance," she said, mimicking the matriarch's voice perfectly, making the others smirk. "What sporting chance? We have no idea where this guy is." "Don't worry, Eresa, we'll find him and the reward is ours," her second-in-command assured her. Before the exercise had started, Moria had told the commandos that whoever beat the blonde would get a substantial amount of credits for a reward. "If only one group gets the reward, shouldn't we focus on the other groups?" the rear commando asked. It made plausible sense to her. The fewer groups there were, the more likely they would be able to find the blonde and beat him. Eresa shook her head. "No, that's what he would want. Fighting amongst ourselves would give him the advantage." "You would be absolutely right," the voice of the human said, echoing all around them. They raised their weapons, ready to fire, only to have their feet yanked out from under and strung up in a net. As they hung off the ground in the net, they saw Naruto standing upside down on a tree branch with that fox-like grin on his face. I would use the groups fighting against each other to my advantage, just like I would use distracted commandos to my advantage. What was that? One of the Blue Fury commandos asked, spinning around and pointing her gun at a nearby bush. It's just a bush, idiot, the leader told her, making the others smirk. She was the FNG of the group, so she was the one who was frequently teased or tormented. It would fade after they got used to her, or when she died, whichever came first. Sorry, I'm just nervous, she apologized. How can you be nervous? It's just one person we're up against, another of the group reminded her. It wasn't even a task they were doing. It was a sport. Yeah, but I read up on this guy. It seemed like the smart thing to do. From what she had read, that had been the right idea. From what I've learned, when he was just a low-rank shinobi, he fought against 2 demons and a god and won all 3. Granted, she had gotten the information from a children's book, but she wasn't about to let the rest of the group know that. Unfortunately, the rest of the group laughed at her. Seriously? Asked the leader, hefting her gun up onto her shoulder. He fought against 2 demons and a god. Who would believe that kind of crap? Talk about unrealistic things. You have a point there, their target's voice rang out. Before they could react, a blur burst out of a nearby bush and swiftly knocked the legs out from under the commando at the rear. As she fell, he rendered her unconscious with a quick blow to the head and disappeared out of sight, all before they could get a good aim on him. I mean, Zabuza was certainly no demon, but he tried to live up to the title, he continued speaking like nothing had happened. The remaining commandos raised their weapons and started looking around for him. But all they could see was trees and foliage. Where is he? Anyone seen him? The leader demanded as she focused on the trees around her, ready to take the shot if he appeared. I can't see him. I don't know where he is. One of the commandos replied, sounding very nervous. She had never seen a commando be taken down that quickly, even if she was surprised. Nor had she seen anyone move that fast before. And I don't think Gaara was a demon either, their target spoke again, echoing around them. He was just slightly terrifying to those who didn't know him. Before anyone saw him, Naruto looked like he appeared out of a tree and rushed them. They turned to fire at him, but they weren't fast enough. He vaulted over one of them and while in midair, he grabbed another one and spun her around so that her back was facing him. As gravity took control of him again, he slammed his knee into her back, pressing her into the ground and knocking her unconscious. The 3 remaining commandos whipped around and opened fire, but they had hit nothing. He had disappeared again. How in the name of the goddess can he move that? The leader demanded as she swung her gun around. Nobody can move that fast. Well, apparently, he can. The FNG replied. What can we do against this guy? The 3rd commando asked, trying to stay calm. It was difficult as she was getting more and more scared. It felt like she was facing a hunter who knew her every move while she didn't know a single one of his. As for Nagato, he wasn't a god, just a man with a dream. The target spoke for the 3rd time, making them even more nervous. He leapt down from a tree branch and charged at them. Grabbing hold of the commando in the middle by her waist, he continued charging and disappeared into the woods, the commando's scream cut off abruptly. And personally, I think that made him more than a god, he spoke after a minute of unnerving silence. The leader couldn't take it anymore. She screamed and started firing into the woods, hitting nothing but wood and leaves. She was so scared and frightened that she didn't think to use her biotics. Where are you? She shouted at the forest. Where do you think I am? He asked back, his voice echoing around them. His tone was slightly teasing, taunting them. Come out and face me, you coward. Give me a fair fight. Are you kidding? With no warning, he landed behind her and covered her mouth as well as her nose, slowly suffocating her until she blacked out from the lack of oxygen. I'm a shinobi. The words fair fight are not in our dictionary. In fact, I'm fairly certain a few people used to consider them to be blasphemous, he told her unconscious body as it collapsed to the ground. He heard the sound of a gun being raised from behind him. He turned around and saw the FNG pointing her gun at him. Saint stay put, she ordered, desperately trying not to sound scared shitless. But her voice was shaky and so were her hands. She couldn't keep a steady aim on the blonde, who stared at her with no expression on his face. I mean it, stay there. He ignored the threat and took a step towards her. He kept walking until he stood a few inches in front of the gun. Her shaking increased and she could barely hold the gun. In her mind, she wasn't facing a human. She was facing a messenger of death who came to take her. He reached up and gently took the gun from her. You're green, aren't you? He asked her quietly. She could nod her head rapidly. He was silent for a moment until he offered her gun back to her. She took it and he quickly rendered her unconscious with a chop to her neck. Before she hit the ground, he had disappeared. Do you see him? The Silent Strike's leader asked the sniper. No, I don't, she answered. She was up in the tree while the others were in cover down below. And I don't see any of the other groups either. This group, like some of the others, had decided to attack the other groups so they could have a better chance of winning the reward. Keep looking, she ordered. The sniper didn't say anything in return. She just shifted her weight on the branch that held her. It's been over 2 hours since we came into this forest, another commando grumbled as she checked her shotgun. The only things we've seen so far are the other groups. Where could one blonde human go? Before anyone could answer her question, sarcastically or not, the sound of something falling filled their ears, which was quickly followed by the sound of a body hitting the ground. They turned to see what had happened, only to find their sniper unconscious. Perhaps he was waiting for you a lot to realize he had been watching you for the past 15 minutes, the blonde's voice rang out above them. They looked up and saw him crouched low on the same branch the sniper had been perched on. He leapt down at them, ready for the fight. The surrounding area was filled with the sounds of gunfire, biotics, and flesh hitting flesh. Then silence. The pale ghosts moved through the forest at a quick pace. They had entered the forest with a confidence that bordered on swaggering. Now they were just trying to make sure they weren't caught. They had found other commando groups, all knocked out or tied up. The first few were funny. It stopped being funny after they found the 10th group and was quickly turning into scary. "We need to get out of here," one of the commandos said. She kept glancing around, looking for the danger. She saw nothing. That's what scared her. A couple of others felt the same way, but the leader was stubborn. "No, we stick it out. Boss, you can't be serious." She whipped her head around and glared at her. "We're not cowards. We don't run from a fight we can win." The commandos that were a part of this exercise were some of the best, but the pale ghosts were the best of the best. Matriarch Moria came to them first. "You've seen the other groups. You really think we can go up against someone like that?" "Yes, I can and so do you. You got any complaints you can shove them." But she didn't want to hear it. "I hear anyone say anything about this, they're out once we're clear of this exercise. Anything more and I will shoot you myself, clear?" She all but screamed. None of her group said a word. "Good. Now." The ground suddenly gave way beneath them. They fell screaming into a large pit, landing hard at the bottom. They laid there for a brief moment and then got back up. "Who's hurt?" the leader asked, checking herself for injuries. There only seemed to be bruises. The rest of her group told her the same thing. "All right, we need to." The hole above them was suddenly closed with a makeshift barricade. Even if they were able to use their biotics to move it, they had fallen more than 20 feet into the pit. The walls looked to be made of earth with no stone in sight. They weren't going to climb out of here. They heard something fluttering down through the air. It was a piece of paper, something that had been pushed through one of the barricade's holes. The leader grabbed it once it was close and read it. The message was short. "Mind the gap." They had not moved from the clearing since both the blonde and the commando groups went into the forest. While Erzia was uncertain about who would win, Moria was completely confident in the commandos. They were the best on Thessia and she had no doubt in her mind that they would beat the blonde. After all, commandos were the finest soldiers in the galaxy, despite what others might say. She made a show of checking the time. "It's been well over 3 hours, gentlemen," she told the humans. "If your so-called legendary shinobi is still going, then he must be hiding from the commandos. That's the only way he'd survived this long." "You're rather confident about the commandos," Matriarch Moria Hackett commented. "Well, of course, few humans have ever gone up against commandos," she replied. "They're in a class all of their own. Everyone knew that. And so is Naruto." Neji replied. He had grown to like the blonde ever since he had been released from the seal and was willingly to defend him. "You will have to pardon me if I don't believe you," she told him with her usual arrogance. Erzia was starting to find it off-putting. "I find it hard to believe that he would be able to win against 20 of the best commando groups on Thessia." She had her people do the right research to find those groups. They wouldn't disappoint her. She heard a slight chuckle coming from the forest. When she looked, she froze in place. "Then should I just go back in there and wait for them all to get up so we can have round 2? Naruto asked, leaning against one of the trees. When everyone turned their attention onto him, he walked towards them all. "By the way, you probably shouldn't have offered that reward to them," he told Moria. "I spent the first 45 minutes watching them attack each other. That novel idea actually shortened the whole exercise by quite some time." "You only used the cage bunshin?" Neji asked for clarification. If the blonde said yes, then that meant he had won the bet. "You mean aside from standing upside down on tree branches and on the sides of the trees?" "Pretty much, yeah," he answered. The Hike wore a triumphant smirk while the other humans, minus Hackett and Anderson, who remained professional, grumbled at the loss. "The rest was just me." Of course, he wasn't going to mention that his clones had already occupied the forest for nearly 4 hours before the exercise began. The matriarchs really should have thought better of giving Hackett the forest's location. "I trust your doubts have been laid to rest." Hackett asked Moria, who didn't say anything in return. She was still frozen in place, but it looked like her surprise was turning into anger. Then, if you'll excuse us, we will leave. He turned around and began walking away. Anderson and the others followed him. Urzia joined them, running up to Neji's side. As they walked away from the clearing, Naruto turned back to the matriarch. For the record, when I said that I thought this whole thing was kinda unfair, I meant for them, he told her. He was not smug or arrogant. He was completely serious. The next time you want to try something like this on me, try the best 50 commando groups on Thessia. That should be more of a challenge. He walked away from the clearing, leaving a stunned and somewhat infuriated Asari matriarch there. Codex entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance. Shinobi ranking. While most races of the galaxy use a number of different number systems to rank the difficulty of something, humanity is unique in the fact that they use a letter system to ascertain the difficulty. The system uses 6 letters, the lowest rank is E, and the highest is S. The ranks are used for describing the difficulty of either or a mission. The rank is only for academy, taught to the academy students. While the weakest in the ranking order, they are the most often used, becoming second nature to a seasoned shinobi. D rank are those that are usually taught to newly made genin when they've graduated from the academy. Likewise, D rank missions are usually given exclusively to genin, as it is the lowest rank in missions. C rank takes some training before being able to be properly utilized and are usually for shinobi who have been given the rank of chunin. C rank missions are generally given to chunin, although they are also given to genin who have enough experience. B rank are usually utilized by chunin and genin. B rank missions are also usually assigned to chunin and genin. They are quite different from a D rank or C rank mission, as they are more likely to encounter opposition. A rank are used by shinobi of genin or cage levels. Extensive training is required before being able to use these. There is also a possibility that this can be proven as a hazard to the user, which would classify the as A rank missions are assigned to genin and usually include the personal interest of a country. S rank is intended to be used by highly experienced genin or cage level shinobi. Most of these ranks are unique to a shinobi and are like a trademark to that shinobi. S rank missions are the most dangerous of the ranks. They are exclusively taken by highly skilled genin or a large group of shinobi. These ranks, with the exception of E, are also assigned to missing min or rogue shinobi, see. Missing min. The ranks of shinobi are completely different from those concerning missions. Even though there are many different military ranks in the modern day, the ancient ranks are still informally used to describe a group of ranks. Genin are low shinobi, who have just graduated from the academy. In modern day, if one is called a genin, then they have the rank of serviceman 3rd class, 2nd class, or 1st class. Chunin are middle shinobi. They have more experience than genin, but have less experience than genin. To be called a chunin in modern times, one is of the rank of service chief, gunnery chief, or operations chief. Akubetsu genin are genin who have genin training in one area instead of having all-around training and are usually assigned as subordinates to genin. In the modern day, one must be a 2nd lieutenant, 1st lieutenant, or a staff lieutenant to be called a Takubetsu genin. Genin are high shinobi. They are the highest of normal shinobi ranks, second only to the rank of kage. Nowadays, if one is called a genin, then they must be a lieutenant commander, staff commander, captain or major, rear admiral or general, admiral, or fleet admiral. Chapter 7. When does normal go out the window? No matter how much he ran, he couldn't see the edge of the forest. The trees surrounding him had no leaves on their branches and looked like they had survived a forest fire. The ground itself was scorched and he saw flakes of ash floating through the air. He knew he was running, but he was running in slow motion. Wherever he looked, he saw shades of people. But whenever he got close to them, they would fade away. What is going on? Where am I? He asked himself as he kept moving. Hello, is there anyone out there? He called out. Some of the shades seemed like they turned to hear his voice, but he couldn't tell if they actually were. Do you? A faint whisper of a voice echoed in his ear, making him look around, trying to see who it was that had spoken. But all he saw was the burned-out forest. Hello? He called out again. But you? The whisper echoed again, sounding a little clearer. It was also a little closer. Where are you? He looked for where that particular voice was coming from amongst the shades. Is that you? For the 3rd time the whisper echoed in his ear, much clearer than before. This time, he managed to hear where it came from. He followed the sound of the whisper, zeroing in on a particular shade. As he got closer, the shade became more and more lifelike until the back of the person stood in front of him. He reached out to grab the person's shoulder, turning him around. But when he saw who the person was, he stumbled back in surprise. "Oh, Orochimaru?" he asked in surprise. He shouldn't have to ask who it was. That pale skin, purple markings, and golden serpent eyes belonged to only one person. That same person had died nearly a year into the war at Nakatani. "Hello, Naruto," the snake-san greeted him with a smile that made him recoil. The two of them had never seen eye to eye due to their past history. Naturally the blonde was weary of him. "Have you come to join the damned?" "What are you talking about? Where the hell are we?" he asked, looking around. They were still in the forest, but it looked like all the shades had disappeared. It was just the two of them in the forest. Not exactly a comforting thought. Orochimaru paused and looked around himself. He seemed solemn, almost sad. That wasn't an expression he had before. "I don't know where this is. But I feel it is a place for those who are damned," he answered. "I guess I can understand why you're here. But I don't know why I'm here." "Are you sure?" he asked with a knowing smirk. "I would have thought you'd be damned for failing to save all of those people that Obito killed." That was a low blow, even if it was true. He still felt guilty for letting those people die, but he kept telling himself that it wouldn't happen again. In the end, his words came true. "I don't consider myself to be damned because of that. And I'm not dead." "Are you so sure about that?" He looked down at Naruto's feet. The blonde followed his gaze and saw that his feet were on fire. Before he could put the fire out, he was engulfed in a bonfire. Pain blinded all of his senses as he burned. As Orochimaru faded away, he could only scream. He came awake with a shout, trying to free himself from what felt like some kind of cloth prison. When gravity took effect and he almost fell down to the ground, he remembered that he had been sleeping in a hammock. When he had first seen the sleeper pods that the crew used, the first words out of his mouth were "fuck no." Before anyone could convince him otherwise, he made his way down to the storage area of the ship, unsealed a hammock and some rope. He told the confused onlookers that Jiraiya had all but beaten the lesson of "you never know when you're going to need it" into his brain during their trip and proceeded to set it up. As he calmed down, he slowly lowered himself from the hammock. When he finally got his legs untangled, he just laid there on the floor, letting it cool him off. It had been 2 days since he had left Thesha in Normandy. They had made a stop at Arcturus, he stayed on board while they were there, and now they were officially starting the shakedown run of the ship. He wasn't really sure what that was, and he didn't bother to ask anyone. Of course, he had also said goodbye to Neji and his family. Flashback. He stood before Normandy, taking a good long look at it. Most of the ships he had known before he was sealed away had been made of wood. He was still getting used to the idea of one being made out of metal. "So, I'm going to be riding in this?" he asked Neji, who stood next to him along with Hanabi and Lies. It had only been a day since the exercise with the commandos. Since Hackett had cleared him for duty, he was joining Normandy and leaving Thesha. He had a feeling they wanted him off the planet so he wouldn't antagonize others and to avoid any incoming Niners. "What's the matter, Naruto?" Hanabi asked him. "You've been staying on Everest for the past 2 weeks." She would have thought he had gotten used to the idea. "I know that, Hanabi. But I'm still getting used to the idea about a ship that can fly through space." He knew this was going to be an experience, but he wasn't sure if it was going to be a good one or not. Everest had stayed in orbit around the planet. This would be his first time in an actual flying ship, he didn't count the shuttle rides to and from the planet. "Don't worry, you'll get used to it in no time," Neji assured him. "I hope so." They stood in silence for a few minutes. Naruto wasn't quite sure what he could say to them. He had only known them for a little while, and he didn't know if he would see them again. "Well, I should probably get going," he finally said. "Bye, Naruto. I'm gonna miss you," Hanabi told him sadly. She had grown to like the blonde and didn't really want him to go. But she also knew that he was a shinobi. There were times that he had to go and this would be one of them. "I'm going to miss you too, kid." He smiled down at her. "Now, can you make me a promise?" "A promise?" "Sure," she answered without missing a beat. "What kind of promise?" "I want you to promise me that you're gonna be the best shinobi that has ever come out of the academy." That she could do and she would. "Yes, sir." She threw him a salute and he returned it with a grin. "Neji, thanks for helping me out with the modern time," he told Hanabi's father, dropping the salute as he faced the Haikta. "It was my pleasure, Lord Naruto," he replied with a small smirk. He knew that calling the blonde a lord was guaranteed to make him annoyed. But he also wouldn't do anything to make him stop. "Don't call me a lord." Sure enough, there was the annoyed retort. The two of them stared at each other for a quiet moment before the blonde smiled. "I hope I'll see you and your family again." He could hope. "We hope for the same," Lies told him, a gentle smile on her lips. "Good luck, Naruto." "Thank you, Leisha. But I don't need luck, it comes naturally." He turned back to look at the ship. "I guess I better get on it before they come looking for me or something." With a wave goodbye, he left the family and walked towards the hatch of the Normandy. Then flashback. Sir, are you okay?" A nearby engineer, a frontiersman, asked him, bringing him out of his musings. "Yeah, I'm fine. I just had a weird dream, that's all," he told him as he sat up and stretched a little. Having slept only in his underwear and shades, he was giving the surrounding people a little bit of a show. The women in the room appreciated the show. About what, sir? Asked the engineer, trying to keep the conversation going. He was straight, but even he had to admit that the blonde was nicely developed. It also didn't help that his skin was the kind of tan one could only get from being under the sun and not from any tanning bed. Nothing really, I just met Orochimaru in a ruined forest. He paused for a moment and looked over at the engineer. Not to be rude, but you do know who Orochimaru is, right? Yes sir, I do. He was one of the most evil and vile shinobi to have ever been trained. He was a part of the first generation of the Densetsu no Sannin until he went rogue and fled from the village. The engineer wasn't quite sure why he sounded like he was reciting an answer to a teacher, but he wasn't really sure how else to answer the legend. Yeah, that was the snake bastard in a nutshell, Naruto agreed. Then he scowled but also looked a little amused. That just makes the way he died even weirder. Didn't he die after a massive manhunt in battle? He asked. He had only one class of shinobi history when he was in high school, so he wasn't aware of everything that had happened. No. He died saving his granddaughter. The very concept of Orochimaru having a child, let alone a grandchild, had been baffling and a little weird the first time he heard about it. But then they had gone after Orochimaru to Nakatani, so there wasn't much time to think about it. When they had reached the town the Snake Sannin had hidden his child's family, Orochimaru already had his granddaughter in his arms, the rest of her family had already been killed. He passed her off to Tsunade and ran away, back into the town. They quickly figured out why. That was the first time any of them had seen Obito descend from the sky when watching a place burn. He chased after Orochimaru through the burning streets. He didn't kill him, right? No, he toyed with the Snake Sannin. They had chased after Obito, but he didn't really care about them. His attention was only on Orochimaru. By the time he had gotten bored and left, the snake was close to death. He all but begged Anko to take his granddaughter in, which she did, and said goodbye to Tsunade before he died. When they were back in the village, Naruto found her in her office, drunk and crying over what looked like a photo of her and her teammates after they had made Chiknin. He left her alone with her grief. You're right, sir. That's a little weird for a man like him, the engineer admitted. But still, he died saving his family. Even an evil man can do that. The fact that I have never denied, the blonde told him. Even though Orochimaru was a snake bastard, he was human. Hey, Commander Uzumaki, the voice of the pilot, one Jeff Joker Muro rang out over the intercom. The two of them had met when Naruto first came aboard the Normandy and got along quite well with each other. We're approaching the relay and considering the fact that you slept through the first one, I'd figured you would want a front row seat for this. Yeah, thanks Joker. I'm on my way up, he replied as he grabbed his clothes and put them on with practiced ease. As he made his way over to the elevator, he grabbed an apple and chomped down on it. He finished it off as the elevator slowly went upwards. If this thing is really this slow, maybe they should have just put in stair, he thought to himself as he fiddled with the apple core. When the door finally opened, he walked out, tossing the core into a nearby trash disposal. The Archer's Prime relay is in range, Joker announced over the intercom. Initiating transmission sequence. Naruto kept walking forward through the command deck, heading to the cockpit as the pilot kept talking. We are connected. Calculating transit mass and destination. The relay is hot. Acquiring approach vector. All stations are secure for transit. Hey, guys, the blonde said in greeting as he walked into the cockpit and looked around. He saw Joker in the pilot seat, along with a guy called Kaden Alenko, who sat in the co-pilot seat. Nilla stood behind them and watched in silence. Hey, Naruto, Joker greeted him. Just kick back and watch the show. He turned his attention back to the controls. Board is green. Approach run has begun. As he stared out of the window, Naruto was astounded. When he was first taken to Everest and saw space for the first time out of the window, he stared out the window and stunned off for a good 10 minutes. But what hung before them surprised him even more. He didn't even know how to describe it really. All he could really say was that it looked somewhat like a tuning fork with rings revolving around a big blue core of element 0. If he hadn't known that beforehand, he would have thought it was chakra. Kami, that's impressive, he said aloud. Even though nobody said anything in return, they all silently agreed with him. Hitting the relay in 3, 2, 1. Joker counted down as he flew the ship closer to the core. An arc leapt out from the core and struck Normandy. As the ship drew away from the core, the arc vanished and it shot forward so fast that it left a trail in its wake. Thrusters. Check. Navigation. Check. Internal emission sync. All systems online. Drift. Just 1500 k, Joker finished up as they sped through space. 1500 is good. Your captain will be pleased, Nillis commented before walking away. Joker glanced back at as he left the bridge. I hate that guy, he said once he was sure he left. Nillis gave you a compliment. So you hate him? Kaden asked with some small confusion. It sounded like a compliment to him. Spectres are trouble. I don't like having him on board. Call me paranoid. You're paranoid, he replied in deadpan. The council helped fund this project. They have a right to send someone to keep an eye on their investment. Yeah, that is the official story. But only an idiot believes the official story. He's got a point there, Naruto commented, joining in on the conversation. Kakashi had always told him to look underneath, and what Joker had said was quite similar. Both required a second look. So there's more going on here than the captain's letting on. He would have continued had the intercom not beeped. Joker? Status report, Anderson's voice ordered. Just cleared the mass relay, Captain, he automatically answered, quickly double-checking a few things. Stealth systems engaged. Everything looks solid. Good. Find a comm buoy and link us to the network. I want mission reports relayed back to Alliance Brass before we reach Eden Prime. Aye, Captain. Better brace yourself, sir. I think Nihilus is headed your way. He's already here, Lieutenant. A small awkward silence filled the bridge. Tell Commander Uzumaki to meet me in the comm room for a debriefing, Anderson finished before the intercom turned off. You get that, Commander? Joker asked Naruto. Yeah, I got it. He turned around and began to walk away. After a few steps, he stopped and turned back around with a sheepish look on his face. At the risk of sounding like an idiot, where's the comm room exactly? In the 2 days he had been on the Normandy, he mostly kept to the storage area or the mess. Both Joker and Kaden shared a look. If it had been anyone else, eye-rolling and sarcasm would have come out in full. Just go past the stairs and around the wall in the back, you won't miss it, Kaden instructed him. Thanks, Kaden. He turned back around and kept on walking. As he walked into what the crew called the SIC, when he asked what that stood for, they told him it meant Combat Information Center. He noticed that the ship's medical nin was talking with one of the genin who looked like he was barely in his 20s. I grew up on Eden Prime, Doc, the genin told her. He looked eager and excited enough to pass for a puppy. It's not the kind of place Spectres visit. There's something Nihilus isn't telling us about this mission. That's crazy, the doctor, Naruto believed her name to be Chakwas, she had an attitude that eerily reminded him of Tsunade, albeit with much less booze on hand, replied. The captain's in charge here. He wouldn't take orders from a Spectre. Not his choice, Doc. Spectres don't answer to anyone. They can do whatever they want. Kill anyone who gets in their way. Ha. You watch too many spy vids, Jenkins, she told him, making him scowl at her for the comment. Then they noticed that Naruto was standing nearby. What do you think, Commander? Jenkins asked him as he saluted. We won't be staying on Eden Prime too long, will we? I'm itching for some real action. He said excitedly. Naruto just stared at him. He sounded exactly like the blonde back when he was a brand new genin. In fact, it was a little scary to see the similarities. He could almost see the green on him. I sincerely hope you're kidding, Corporal, Dr. Chakwas retorted. Your real action usually ends with me patching up crew members in the infirmary. If you want my advice, Jenkins, just keep a level head while on the mission, Naruto told him. You do that, you'll be just fine. Sorry, Commander, he apologized, not sounding apologetic at all. But this waiting is killing me. I've never been on a mission like this before. Not one with a Spectre on board. You and me both, the blonde thought to himself. His clones read up on the Spectre when they all but invaded the library. Basically, the Spectres were the Council's version of Anbu, which meant they were highly trained, knew when to be silent, and only answered to a few. The first time he processed that knowledge, he wondered if there had been any sort of competition between the two groups. If it was definitely off the books. Kid, when it comes down to it in a mission, it won't matter if the guy next to you is a Spectre like Nihilus or a genin like you. What will matter is if you can focus on what needs to be done and be able to do it. That's easy for you to say. You're you, he protested. This is my big chance. If I can show the brass what I can do, I might become qualified to take the Chunin exams. What the hell is he talking about, qualifying for the Chunin exams? I guess that's another thing I'm going to have to check when I get the chance, Naruto said to himself as he looked up the Chunin exams on his to-do list. I have to go. Captain Anderson is waiting for me, he told the two of them. Commander, before you go, can I ask you something? Jenkins asked, suddenly sounding nervous. If he was a kid, he would have been fidgeting. Is the legend about you true? Are you the Jinchuriki of the Jbai? Jenkins? You have no right to ask that of Commander Uzumaki. Dr. Chakwas told him sharply. It's alright, Dr. Naruto assured her. He's just curious, that's all. He was expecting that question sooner or later. Well? Are you? Jenkins asked him again. It was something that was always discussed when it came to Naruto Uzumaki. All the history books and tales say that he sealed himself away to fight the Jbai, but they never say anything about what happens next. For a long while, there had been an idea that he lost a fight and was consumed by the Jbai. He had been killed after he had been freed. Now, people wondered if he was the Jinchkriki of the Jkbai or the Nine Bijk. The blonde just smiled mysteriously at him. Something along those lines, he answered before walking past them and into the comm room. Truth be told, he already knew what happened. Since he was unsealed, he occasionally checked inside his mind. What he had was slumbering, for the moment, and he wasn't going to disturb that. As he walked down the ramp, he saw that Nilus was already there, staring at the screen in front of him. "Hey, Nilus," he said. He hadn't seen them in the past 2 weeks, so he had no idea what he had been up to. Then again, he had spent those 2 weeks getting back into shape, so he didn't really pay attention to anything else. "Naruto, I was hoping you'd get here first. It gives us the chance to talk," the Spectre told him, turning away from the screen. "What do you want to talk about?" he asked, putting his guard slightly up. Well, he hadn't shown any signs that he was going to attack the blonde, one could never be so sure, and with Shinobi, that's a promise. "I'm interested in this world we're going to, Eden Prime. Do you know anything about it?" He shrugged his shoulders. "Only what I've overheard from the crew. It's something of paradise, right?" "Yes. A paradise. Serene. Tranquil. Safe. Eden Prime has become something of a symbol to your people." "I wouldn't know, Nilus. I spent the last 2,000 years sealed away and drifting in space," he reminded the Spectre. It felt a little odd that he had to say that when it had already been established. It's proof that humanity can not only establish colonies across the galaxy, but also protect them. But how safe is it, really? "I've got a question. Why the hell are you asking me all this?" He was a little annoyed. They both knew that he was still getting used to modern times and still didn't know everything that he needed to know. And yet, Nilus was being redundant by asking him these questions. He didn't bat an eyelash, he didn't even have an eyelash. "Your people are still newcomers, Naruto, you especially. The galaxy can be a very dangerous place. The academy instructors said the same thing about being a shinobi. That didn't stop me from joining," he retorted. When he heard that, Nilus couldn't help but smile. He was beginning to like this human. They both heard the sound of the door opening. Anderson walked into the room. "I think it's about time we told Naruto what's really going on," he told Nilus. They nodded in agreement. "This mission is far more than a simple shakedown run," he told Naruto. "Of course it is," the blonde replied sarcastically. "Why else would we've had that incredibly redundant conversation beforehand?" "This is serious," Commander Anderson told him pointedly, using his rank instead of his name to get his attention. "We're making a covert pickup on Eden Prime. That's why we needed the stealth systems operational." He had briefly heard about the stealth capabilities of the Normandy, but he didn't ask for details. All he knew was that it was the first ship that was apparently able to hide from enemy scanners. "How covert are we talking here?" he asked. In his personal experience, the word covert had many definitions, ranging from simply sneaking to being branded as missing and if caught. "This comes down from the top. Information on a strictly need-to-know basis," he clarified. "A research team on Eden Prime unearthed some sort of beacon during an excavation. It was Prothean." Naruto knew only a few things about the Protheans, they were just one of many things his clones had read upon. So he knew they were a little mythical to the galaxy, having supposedly built the mass relays in the Citadel, the seat of power for the galaxy. "I take it that finding something like this is important?" he asked them. "The last time humanity made a discovery like this, it jumped our technology forward 200 years. But Eden Prime doesn't have the facilities to handle something like this. We need to bring it to the Citadel for proper study," the captain explained to him. "Obviously this goes beyond human interests, Naruto," Nilus joined the conversation again. "This discovery could affect every species in council space. Also, the beacon is not the only reason I'm here." The blonde looked at the two of them. "I take it this is what the Alliance wants me to do?" he asked Anderson. "Become the galactic version of an Anbu?" The captain nodded. "The Alliance has been pushing for this for a long time," he explained. "Humanity wants a larger role in shaping interstellar policy. We want more say with the Citadel Council. The Spectres represent the Council's power and authority. If they accept a human into their ranks, it shows how far the Alliance has come." "I've put your name forward as a candidate for the Spectres," Nilus told Naruto. "With your track record, as well as that exercise you had against those commandos, you'd be a shoo-in. But I need to see your skills for myself. Eden Prime will be the first of many missions together. When we get to Eden Prime, you'll be in charge of the ground team," Anderson said. "Secure the beacon and get it onto the ship ASAP. Nilus will accompany you to observe the mission." That surprised him a little. Well, he had been a part of teams before, he had never really led one himself. So he was a little nervous about the idea. But even though he was nervous, he was willing to see if he could do it. "That's fine by me," he told them, keeping his true feelings silent. "What's our ADA?" "We should be getting close to Eden." He was cut off when Joker spoke from the intercom. "Captain?" "We've got a problem," the pilot told them. His voice had none of its usual sarcasm. It was quite serious. "What's wrong, Joker?" Anderson asked him. "Transmission from Eden Prime, sir. You better see this." "Bring it up on screen," he ordered, walking over to the screen. Both Nilus and Naruto turned to look at it as well. The sounds of gunfire and explosions quickly filled their ears. The transmission was incredibly blurry and shaky, even more so after one woman clad in white and pink armor pushed the person filming to the ground. They saw someone trying to send a call, only to be killed a few seconds later. After a few more seconds of filming, it went to static. Everything cuts out after that. No comm traffic at all. Just goes dead. "There's nothing," Joker explained. "Reverse and hold at 38.5, Anderson ordered. The transmission went backwards and froze at the exact spot he had ordered. What they saw was a large metal thing descending from the sky and somehow discharging red lightning. "I don't know about you guys, but that kinda looks like a giant hand to me," Naruto commented. "Status report," the captain told Joker. 17 minutes out, Captain, he promptly answered. "No other Alliance ships in the area." "Take us in, Joker. Fast and quiet," he ordered. "This mission just got a lot more complicated," he remarked as the intercom went off. "A small strike team can move quickly without drawing attention," Nilus noted. "It's our best chance to secure the beacon." "He's right," Naruto agreed. "We should try to keep the people on the team to a minimum. I'd say only 3, maybe 4 people." "Very well, grab your gear and meet us in the cargo hold," Anderson told Nilus, who nodded and walked away. "Tell Alenko and Jenkins to suit up, Commander," he said to Naruto. "You're going in." He saluted and walked away, leaving Anderson alone in the comm room. Location: Earth. As Maya walked into the office, she took a swing from her jug. "Hot out there," she remarked, falling into her chair. She had room to stretch her legs out if she wanted to and she did. It felt great. Liam looked up from his Omni tool. "Yeah, the weather report said it was going to be a scorcher today. Just hope it rains soon." She took off her hat and tossed it onto the computer. Her aim was dead on and it landed on the corner. "Doesn't look like it." He went back to his Omni tool. "Anything interesting out there?" She shook her head. "Just a family camping near the pine trees. They're on their way to the Scar." Gave them the standard warnings and wished them a safe trip. She had done it so many times, she could do it in her sleep. "Oh saints help me, is it tourist season again?" He asked a groan, pushing his hand through his balding hair. Liam made no effort to hide the fact he was losing his hair. He liked to joke that the only reason he wasn't a fat middle-aged man was because of the job. It might not sound something true, but being a park ranger in Golden Oak National Park was no slouching matter, especially when they were so close to the damned land. She nodded. "Yeah, it is. We're going to have to brace ourselves for it." She reached out for the computer on her desk. A quick check of her email showed a new one. "Huh? What?" "Got an email from a Dr. Vomasambonian. He'd like to meet with me." He frowned puzzledly. "Don't think I've heard that name before." "Neither have I." It was a name. That was all she knew at the moment. She did a quick check on her computer. "Looks like he's not our typical doctor." That got Liam's attention. When it came to doctors, they usually dealt with the kind with degrees in botany, zoology, and such. "What kind?" he asked, getting interested. "Archaeology." And it seemed that he was something of a noted name in the field. "Archaeology? We don't have ruins anywhere around here." She looked up from the computer. "What about that supposed burial site of an oak?" "That was a rumor we made for tourists. They bought it in bulk and made it a very busy year." He still shuddered when he thought about it. "Well, he wants to meet for a late lunch in town." She checked the time. If she left now and took the jeep, she could make it. She stood up, pushing back her chair. "I'll be back, Liam." She reached out and took. He looked up at her. "Be safe, Maya." He watched as the statuesque blonde walked out of the office, putting her hat back on her head. She was a good kid, even if she didn't like or even want to talk about her past. That was okay. He had been a Mac long enough to regale them both with stories. When she felt like talking about what happened to her, he was certain she would tell it to a friend. Location: Eden Prime. Engaging stealth systems, Joker announced as they entered the atmosphere of Eden Prime. As he flew the Normandy down out of the sky, he got a closer look at the ground beneath them. "Somebody was doing some serious digging here, Captain," he commented. "Thank you, Joker," Anderson replied before turning to face Naruto and his squad. Both Jenkins and Kaden were wearing their armor with their weapons. Naruto wore no armor and carried no guns. The only new thing he had was a comm device in his ear. That way he could easily communicate with teammates, Nilus, and the ship. "Your team's the muscle in this operation," Commander Anderson told the blonde. "Go in heavy and head for the dig site." "What about survivors, Captain?" asked Kaden. "Helping survivors is a secondary objective. The beacon is your top priority, he answered, making sure his point was made. Approaching drop point 1, Joker announced as the cargo bay door opened, filling their ears with the howling of the wind. Nilus? You're coming with us? Jenkins asked who was standing nearby, checking his weapons. He had packed on enough firepower to make any possible enemy think twice. He shook his head. I move faster on my own, he told them. He took a running leap out of the ship, disappearing fast. Nilus will scout out ahead, Anderson told the other three. He'll feed you status reports throughout the mission, otherwise, I want radio silence. He still needs someone to watch his back, Naruto said, folding his hands into a hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu. A clone appeared at his side with a poof of smoke. Without saying a word, the clone leapt out after Nilus. He'll be able to see how a clone can be helpful in this kind of situation, he told Anderson. The captain nodded once in agreement. The mission's yours now, Naruto. Good luck. The blonde held his tongue about not needing luck. He figured it wasn't the time for that kind of thing. We are approaching drop point 2, Joker stated over the intercom. As the Normandy settled into a brief hover, Naruto took the initiative and leapt out of the ship. Both Kaden and Jenkins were right behind him. The minute they had hit the ground, Naruto was alert and the other two had weapons out and ready. Ship perimeter secured, Commander. Kaden told him after they made a quick check. Right, I'm the team leader, Naruto reminded himself. Would he ever get used to that feeling? Alright, let's move. He started moving and the other two fell in behind him. Time to play the game, he thought to himself. The field they were moving through was encompassed by both trees and high rocks. Several small clusters of rocks littered the field, which would give them good cover if they needed it. He glanced up at the rocks' points. Good elevation. He could use them to get the height advantage or the drop. As they moved, they saw a couple of creatures floating nearby. What the hell are those? Kaden demanded, pointing his gun at them. They floated across the field like nothing was wrong. That didn't mean things couldn't change. Jenkins gave them a look and immediately dismissed them. Gas bags. Don't worry, they're harmless, he said with a small grin directed at the biotic in the group. He returned it with a scowl. This place got hit hard, Commander Nilus told him through the comm. Hostiles everywhere. Keep your guard up. Understood, he replied. Is my clone with you? Yes, he's currently following my lead. Good. If you find something that you think I need to see for myself, let him know. He'll know what to do. If you say so, they said before turning off the comm. Naruto heard the disbelief in his voice, so odds are he wouldn't tell the clone. But as long as the clone kept by his side, that was fine by him. They kept to the path, ignoring the water besides them. They could hear a battle off in the distance, so they tried to make their way there. Oh, Hades' eye, Jenkins said in horror as they passed two corpses burned to a crisp laying on a nearby rock. He might not be from the island kingdoms, but their swearing could be useful. Must be his first time seeing a burnt body, Naruto thought to himself. He had also taken notice of the bodies, but he wasn't as horrified. He had seen one too many during the war. He was used to seeing mounds of them. Just one or two was nothing to mention. You'll have to get used to the sight, Jenin, he told Jenkins shortly. You'll probably be seeing more. He winced slightly at the thought but nodded his head. Yes sir, he replied. They passed two more dead bodies before entering another field riddled with rocks. Naruto suddenly stopped midway through the field. Wait, he said, holding his hand up. What's wrong, Commander? Kaden asked him. I don't know. Something just doesn't feel right, it's too quiet. They should have encountered something other than just gas bags, but so far, nothing. He didn't like it. I'll scout ahead, sir, Jenkins said, trying to make up for the bodies. Before either the blonde or the biotic could stop him, he moved forward. As he moved further through the field, three floating machines appeared from the other end and opened fire on him. He gave one strangled shout before falling down to the ground. Blood leaked into the ground from his body. As the machines turned their attention to the other two humans, they quickly dove for cover. The sound of the machines firing filled the air. While Kaden stepped enough out of cover to return fire, Naruto pulled a few shuriken from the holster. Their shields are gone, sir. Kaden said as he stepped back into cover. The blonde nodded, stood up out of cover, and expertly threw each of the shuriken at the machines. For a moment the machines just hovered there in the air, looking odd with the shuriken in their headlights. Then the moment passed and the machines exploded. What fell to the ground didn't even cover scrapes. Both men silently stepped out from behind the rocks and approached Jenkins' body. Kaden saw the damage. It made his stomach turn a little. Ripped right through his shields, Kaden stated after he closed Jenkins' eyes. He never had a chance. Damn it, Naruto mentally swore. He always hated it when he lost someone on his team. Jenkins was eager and that got him killed, but he was still Naruto's responsibility. Now he is dead. Even though it was wishful thinking, Naruto hoped he wouldn't have to keep going through this again. Once he was done berating himself, he focused on what came next. He and Kaden couldn't spend time mourning him. "You'll get a proper burial when we're done here, Kaden. But for now, we have to focus," he told the biotic. Aye, sir," he replied automatically, getting back to his feet and pulling out his gun again. They approached the other end of the field. Kaden saw more of the same machines approaching. "Incoming drones." He shouted at Naruto. Thanks to that, they weren't caught off guard and were able to destroy the drones quickly. They both felt a small amount of satisfaction as they watched the machines explode. "I've got some burned out buildings here, Naruto," Nilla spoke through the comm. "A lot of bodies. I'm going to check it out. I'll try to catch up to you at the dig site." The comm beeped off before the blonde could respond. They passed under a couple of trees before ending up on the top of a hill. Below them, they saw one of the soldiers from the transmission, the one who wore the pink and white armor, running away from drones that were firing at her. "We need to get down there now," Naruto said as she stumbled and fell to the ground. As he and Kaden bolted down the hill, she turned around, pulled out her pistol and opened fire on the drones, causing them to explode. "I think she's okay," Commander Kaden remarked. Their attention was distracted by a pair of humanoid robots, at least the blonde hoped they were robots, holding a human civilian over something. A white spike suddenly jutted upwards from beneath the civilian, skewing him on it. Whatever screams the man could give vanished before they had a chance to escape. Their job done, the two robots turned their attention back to the woman, who had hidden behind a cluster of rocks and held her assault rifle in hand. Both Naruto and Kaden reached the bottom of the hill and joined the woman behind the cluster. The robots opened fire, hoping to get hit by the humans through the cluster as they slowly approached. Naruto heard the cluster being hit with the bullets. If it kept up, their cover would be chewed through and they'd be out in the open. Best to take care of the robots before that happened. "Kaden, you and the lady give me some cover fire," he ordered. Kaden glanced at the blonde. He knew who he was and all, but the man didn't have a single gun on him. He was a little concerned. "What are you going to do?" he asked him. He made a hand seal. "I'm getting up close and personal." After making a clone and pulling out a kunai, the two stepped out of cover and charged out at the two robots, keeping low. Both Kaden and the woman distracted the robots, Kaden using his biotics and the woman using her gun. The robots were halted by the attack. They returned fire but didn't realize that Naruto and his clone had gotten close to them. In unison, they swept the legs out from under them and plunged their kunai into the chest piece, while also using the other hand to smash the headpiece. They were dead in a matter of seconds. "Thanks for the help," the woman said, standing back up as he dismissed his clone. "I didn't think I was going to make it." Gunnery Chief Ashley Williams of the 212, she introduced herself, saluting. "You the one in charge here, sir?" "I'm Nin Naruto Uzumaki, of Normandy." He returned the salute. "Are you wounded, Williams?" She waited for the punchline, but nothing came. He stood there like he was serious. "Naruto Uzumaki. You're kidding me, right?" she asked with a small frown. She didn't have time for someone to play games with her. "Are you wounded, Chiknin?" he repeated in the same tone of voice, using her rank instead of her name. Even though he sounded exactly the same, something told her that if she didn't answer both promptly and correctly, bad things would happen. She got the point and responded quickly. "A few scrapes and burns. Nothing serious." The others weren't so lucky. "What happened?" She took a deep breath, taking that moment to remember what happened. "We were patrolling the perimeter when the attack hit." She pointed out where they were attacked. "We tried to get off a distress call, but they cut off our communications. I've been fighting for my life ever since." She had lost track of time when that happened. She wasn't sure if it had been a couple of hours or more. "You're the only one who survived." She nodded. "We tried to double back to the beacon, but we walked straight into an ambush. As far as I know, I'm the only one who survived." "Do you have any idea about what we're fighting?" he asked her. Any information he could get about the enemy was good for them. "I think they're," she answered honestly. The word rang faintly in his mind, something one of his clones had read about an uprising. The book didn't have any pictures that went with it, so all he had until now was the word. Hayden couldn't believe what she was saying. "This hasn't been seen outside the Vale in nearly 200 years, he protested. "So why are they here now?" "They must have come for the beacon," she answered. That was the only reason she could think of. "The dig site is closed. Just over that rise," she pointed at said rise. "It might still be there." "Lead the way, Ash," Naruto ordered, shortening her name. Ashley sounded like a bit of a mouthful to him, and Ash sounded a lot smoother. Aye, sir," she replied, not battering an eye at the name shortening. "The beacon is at the far end of this trench." She told them as they began making their way forward. They passed the civilian who was skewered on a spike as well as a few others. While no one said anything, they all felt a bit unnerved by them. Location: Earth. Maya reached town easily, parking the jeep by the little cafe where the meeting was to be. She knew the place. It had a great menu and excellent outdoor seating. Most people preferred to sit outside and enjoy the day when eating there. She was no exception. As it turned out, so was Dr. Vomis. She had to assume the person sitting at the table was Dr. Vomis, mostly because he was the only one at the cafe. And sat beside him, looking around with slightly wide eyes. It made Maya wonder just how old she was. "Dr. Vomis?" she asked as she came over to the table. They looked up at her. "Yes, I am," he said. There was a tone to his voice that made him sound like a teacher ready to lecture a class. "And you are Ms. Maya?" "Yep, that's me." She sat down opposite of them. She looked at them with a curious expression. He noticed her look and gave a brief introduction. "My associate, Dr. Tsoni." "Hello," Dr. Tsoni said politely. "Hey Shelia." She looked back at the. "Have you guys eaten yet?" "We did beforehand. We've been content with drinks for the moment." "Alright. Hope you don't mind if I eat." He gestured like he was allowing it. "Please, go ahead." He waited patiently while she ordered a simple meal of a sandwich and a drink. "Now, to the matter at hand," he said once the waiter walked away. "Yeah, of course. So, why did you want to talk to me?" "Quite simply, Ms. Maya, we wish to hire you." "Okay," she said. "Is there a particular spot in the park you'd like to see?" She started going through the spots in the park I might want to go see. "We do not wish to hire you for a journey to your park. We wish to hire you as security." The statement brought her out of her thoughts. "Security?" she asked, wanting to be sure she heard that right. "Yes," he said with a nod. "We are currently readying ourselves for an excavation in another system and my employers thought it would be prudent to hire someone for security and teach the newcomers how to handle themselves out in the field." He didn't look at her as he spoke, but there was definitely an implication he was talking about her. Maya stared at him for a long moment. "You're kidding, right, mate?" He had to be joking. This sounded like a bad joke because she had no idea what the punchline was. "I'm a park ranger. I help manage a park." "That's not entirely true." He looked her in the eyes. "Is it Lieutenant Clayton?" She froze. How did it go? How could he have known her last name? She had tried to make sure that no one knew that when she came here and became a park ranger. No one knew about her past because she didn't talk about it. And now, there was a stranger who knew who she was. Her hands started twitching, looking for a gun, any kind of weapon. She forced herself to remain calm. "How do you know my name?" "It's not so hard when one has connections," he said dismissively. She didn't like the sound of that. It made her feel suspicious. "How much do you know?" "Everything." Her lunch came out and was placed in front of her. "Now, since we've established that my information is good, can we get to business? My group is currently excavating Prothean ruins and we are in need of security." Your name came up and it agreed wholeheartedly. "We're willing to offer you top payment for your employment as well as any bonus we'd received from a successful dig. All you have to do is ensure our survival for a matter of months and then go back to your life as a park ranger in the Golden Oak National Park." The tone in his voice told her just what he thought of that. Maya stared at him. "And if I say no?" "You won't." "Listen, jackass, this is my life. I can decide whether or not I will take the job. And when I think about you, I'm more inclined to say no." They winced at her tone. She must have felt like she was called out because she was with them. Dr. Vomis didn't do such actions. He stayed in his seat, composed and calm. "You will take the job, Ms. Clayton. Otherwise, I will alert the media to your location. I am sure they would be quite interested in where the missing heir to the Clayton family is residing. And who knows what would happen after that." He knew. And so did she. Once the media came banging down on her, her family would come. She hadn't seen them since she came here to be a park ranger. And she didn't want to see them now. Damn it, he had her over the proverbial barrel and they both knew it. "You son of a bitch." He just smiled. "Glad to have you on board, Ms. Maya." He activated his Omni tool and did some quick typing. "Here's the address for our hotel room. We'll give you till the end of the week to put your affairs in order and quit your job. Meet us there and we'll take you to our ship. I'm sure it will be a pleasure working with you." He stood up from his seat and so did his associate. "Enjoy your meal." They walked away, leaving her alone at the table with her lunch going cold in front of her. Location: Eden Prime. Naruto and his team entered the trench, moving from rock cluster to rock cluster, keeping cover. As they came near the other end of the trench, the dig site came into view. However, that wasn't the only thing that was coming into view. Commander Caden said. "Yeah? We should take cover. My radar is saying we've got a lot of enemy signals coming this way." The blonde preferred to use his eyes. He looked further ahead and saw them coming towards them. He nodded in acknowledgement to Caden, pointing at a cluster close to them. They ducked down behind just in time for the bullets to start flying. Naruto tried leaning out to take a shot, but they were too far away. "We might be in trouble," he said as he pulled his head back. "Don't worry," Commander Ashley told him as she put her gun away. "I got this." She flashed through a few hand seals and stood up. "Kaiten. Nkakik no jutsu, fire style. Great fireball jutsu." A giant fireball spilled forth from her mouth and sailed through, incinerating them. "Okay, they're all gone now," she announced after the fireball disappeared. The two men stood up. "Wow. That's it. Impressive," Kaiten complimented her as he looked at the destruction in front of them. A lot were burned beyond belief. It honestly looked like someone had tried to melt down a large group of metal statues and managed to get halfway done. "It's very well done," Naruto told her. However, his hand blurred as he pulled out a kunai and threw it underhanded at the nearby entrance to the dig site, letting it ricochet off the wall and hit that was hiding on the other side. "You missed one," he remarked as he fell to the ground, the kunai lodged in the photoreceptor. "Show off," Ashley muttered to herself as they entered the dig site. "What was that?" he asked her without turning to face her, leaning down to pull out the kunai. "Nothing," she replied. As she looked around, she frowned. The dig site was the same as the last time, Prothean ruins half buried in the ground. There was less shooting and people running around, but the layout was the same. She could still smell gunfire in the air. There was something missing, though. "This is the dig site. The beacon was right here." "Well, it's not here anymore," Naruto replied sarcastically. "I figured that one out myself," she replied with equal sarcasm. She stopped and considered the situation. It must have been moved. "By who?" Kaiten asked. "Our side. Or the—" "That's hard to say," she admitted. "Maybe we'll learn more after we check out the research camp." "This spot is practically perfect for an ambush," Naruto noted as he looked around the dig site. The site was hemmed in by a ridge that climbed upwards via a natural ramp and a rock wall. There were only two entrances, the way they came in and the ridge. "Do you think anyone survived?" he asked her. If the entrances were blocked off, the chances of getting out alive didn't seem high to him. "Maybe if they were lucky," she answered, looking around. "If I had to guess, they might try hiding in the camp. It's just on the top of this ridge. Up the ramps." She pointed at the ramps in question. "Lead the way." She nodded in acknowledgement and took the lead, leading them up the ramp and out of the dig site. The smell of smoke and gunfire followed them. "Change of plans, Naruto," Nihilus told him through the comm. "There's a small space station up ahead. I want to check it out. I'll wait for you there." "Right," he replied. "Also, Nihilus, the beacon has been moved. We're in the process of finding its location. I'll radio you once we've found out where it is." "Got it," they replied before the comm beeped off. As they climbed up the ramp, they saw the trail of smoke coming out of one of the buildings. "Looks like they hit the camp hard," Ashley noted as they came into view of the camp. The smoke was attached to a fire. That fire was consuming the building. She hoped there was no one in there when it happened. Hayden noticed the same thing but kept his eyes alert on the area itself. "It's a good place for an ambush. Keep your guard up," he warned the others. Naruto didn't reply, he was too busy looking at the three spikes that had what looked to be blackened corpses skewed on them. "Ash. Are those the civilians who are working at the dig site?" he asked her, not taking his eyes off of the spikes. Before she answered, one of the corpses raised its head and moaned. "They're still alive." The biotic among them asked in shock. The spikes retracted themselves, lowering the corpses until they were able to touch the ground themselves. They stood up, looked over at the three living humans, and rapidly approached them. Kaiten used his biotics to push them back easily, but it didn't slow them down. It just made the distance between the two groups wider. "What have they done to them?" Ashley demanded as she opened fire on the corpse on the left. It went down within a few moments, like it was an inanimate object and not a former human being. It was unnerving, if she was being honest. "I don't know and I don't want to have first-hand experience," Naruto replied. He flipped through hand seals and inhaled. "Phton. Renekton, wind style. Drilling air bullet." He spat out 2 air bullets at the remaining corpses, taking their heads off and sending them toppling backwards. Hayden checked the area and found nothing else. "That's all of them," Commander Kaiten announced. "Spread out, see if you can find anything that indicates survivors are still around," the blonde ordered. They searched the ruined camp, inspecting every part of it. The more they looked, the more it seemed like there weren't any survivors. That is, until Ashley tried a door on one of the 2 still intact buildings. Nothing happened. "Commander, this door is closed," she announced. The security lock engaged. "Can you open it?" he asked her as he and Kaiten joined her. "No, the code's been changed," she replied with a shake of her head. "Let me take care of it," Kaiten said, stepping up to the lock, his Omni tool appearing. "I've got some training with hacking. Just give me a minute. And there," he declared triumphantly as the color on the lock changed from red to green. As the door opened, they stepped through, expecting a fight. Instead, they found 2 humans inside. "Humans," cried the woman with relief. "Thank the sage." "Hurry. Close the door." The man beside her urged Naruto. Before they come back. There's no need to worry, he assured the two of them, making sure they could see his hands. We're not here to harm or kill you. While someone else might think that those two words meant the same thing, in his experience it was the complete opposite. Thank you. I think we'll be okay now, the woman told him. Wait, you're Dr. Warren, the one in charge of the excavation, Ashley said in realization. Maybe she would know what had happened when she wasn't there. Do you know what happened to the beacon? It was moved to the spaceport this morning, the doctor answered. Manuel and I stayed behind to help pack up the camp. She gestured over to the man when she said his name. When the men protecting us held them off long enough for us to hide, she grew mournful at the memories. They gave their lives to save us. No one is saved, Manuel told her, his voice sounding slightly unhinged. The age of humanity has ended. Soon, only ruin and corpses will remain. Is he okay? Naruto asked her, jerking his head at her assistant. Manuel has a brilliant mind, but he's always been a bit unstable, she explained, trying to be delicate. Genius and madness are two sides of the same coin. Don't I know it, he thought darkly to himself, remembering the dream he had of Orochimaru. Is it madness to see the future? To see the destruction rushing towards us? To understand there is no escape? No hope? No, I'm not mad. I'm the only sane one left. Manuel continued to rant. I gave him an extra dose of his meds after the attack, Dr. Warren told the blonde in an apology. That's not going to help him much. He had seen that same kind of look Manuel had on his face on many others before. It was the look of utter hopelessness, people who had survived Obito's attack on their village, whether by his own doing or by someone who followed him, war. The look said it all for them, that it was completely hopeless to try and fight against Obito, that it was like an ant trying to fight someone who could easily crush them with his FOOT, which Shikamaru always had a brilliant answer for. Have you ever seen what a swarm of angry killer ants will do to a person? Would you two be safe here? He asked Dr. Warren. Yes, of course we will, she answered. That's good to know, but just in case, I'm going to leave behind a clone. He quickly created said clone, who then stepped outside. He'll keep an eye outside for you. He turned to face Ashley. Can you take us to the spaceport? He asked her. Yes, I can, she answered without any hesitation. You can't stop it. Nobody can stop it. Night is falling. The darkness of eternity, Manuel ranted. Hush, Manuel, Dr. Warren ordered him. Go lie down. You'll feel better when the medication kicks in. She faced the others. I'm sorry about all that. It's okay, Naruto assured her. We'll leave now. Remember, there's a clone outside who will protect you until more help comes. Stay inside and keep the door closed. He walked out of the building and the other two members of his team followed. As the door closed behind them, he exchanged a nod with the clone and proceeded to move to the trail that led away from both the dig site and the camp. As they moved, he pressed his finger against the comm. Nillis, we found Dr. Warren of the excavation team. According to her, the beacon was moved to the spaceport this morning. We're on our way there. Acknowledged, your clone and I will hold down and meet you there. We'll go on together to retrieve the beacon from there, Nillis replied before ending the call. Both he and the clone were approaching the entrance to the spaceport from the forest, just a little ways ahead of Naruto and his team. As they got closer, the Spectre saw that someone was standing in the open at the entry of the spaceport. He motioned the clone to duck behind cover. They crouched behind a low wall and waited. When Nillis was ready, he moved out of cover and lifted his gun, ready to fire. But when he saw who it was, he lowered the gun. Saren. He said in surprise. The clone stood up from behind the wall and joined Nillis. The person in question turned around to face them. He was but he didn't have the tattoos on his face like Nillis did and had also had a horn-like feature on each side of his face that were elongated as they extended backwards as well as on the top of his head. Probably the most obvious thing about him was the fact that his left arm wasn't even his, it was an artificial one. Nillis, he greeted the Spectre, his voice cool and calm. Who is this? He pointed at the clone. Nin Naruto Uzumaki, Spectre candidate, the clone introduced himself, pretending to actually be Naruto. Nillis is observing me. I see. That does seem appropriate, seeing as how Nillis believes your species has potential, HH commented, making it sound like it wasn't a good thing. Thanks, I think. He looked over at Nillis. Who exactly is this guy? This is Saren Arterius, another Spectre and my former mentor, or sensei in your elemental language, he explained. So can we trust him? Yes, but. He turned to face his former mentor. This isn't your mission, Saren. What are you doing here? He asked as he took his supporting hand off his gun. The council thought you could use some help on this one. Plus, now I want to see how the candidate behaves while on a mission. Saren answered as he walked past him, placing a brief reassuring hand on his shoulder. The clone heard a noise over to the side. What was that? he asked, looking over to where the noise came from. It seemed like it was coming from behind some crates. Go check it out, Nilus ordered. He nodded and began moving towards the location of the noise. I wasn't expecting this, the Spectre remarked as he looked around. It seemed like Eden Prime was burning. He wasn't kidding himself. It was burning. The situation's bad. Don't worry, Saren said calmly as he turned around and raised his pistol. I've got it under control. Codex entry, Humanity and the Systems Alliance. The mountain. The landmass on Earth known as the mountain is actually somewhat of a misdemeanor. It is not, as the name would suggest, a mountain that stands in the middle of the ocean. Rather, it is a continent where its most dominating feature is an incredibly large mountain. The mountain, or Everest in the local tongue, is the Earth's largest and highest mountain. It is often said, and proven true many times, that you could walk through the entire continent and you would never lose sight of it. The land surrounding the mountain is capable of supporting life, though the higher one goes, the less likely that'll be. The people who hail from this continent, often called the people from the mountain, due to the fact that when outside civilization first encountered them, they didn't have a name for themselves, are usually farmers or herders. In ancient times, they would rarely travel and only if they needed to. Today, the only major city on the continent would be the port city, which is called the port by both the locals and the rest of the alliance, on the eastern shore. Most trade that comes to the continent comes from there. The people from the mountain has had no ruling class since people started living on the continent. However, they technically live in a theocracy as they listen to the monks of the mountain. The monks often live higher up on the mountain than the rest of the people, living in temples and monasteries. Because they usually cannot grow food from where they live, they are given food from the locals who live beneath them. According to the monks, the mountain is the spiritual center of the earth. They say that a man once came to the mountain and prayed to Kami at its base, seeking guidance. He then began to climb the mountain, offering the same prayer every night he spent on its slopes. When he reached the peak, he fell to his knees and offered the prayer one last time. According to legend, Kami answered his last prayer and blessed him with enlightenment. He descended from the mountain and began to spread knowledge of what he learned, see. Followers of the enlightened path. Years later, his followers built the first temple on the mountain on the spot where he first prayed to Kami. To this day, it is the only temple that is at the base of the mountain. It is said that he is buried underneath the temple and only the head priest knows where it is. The first outsiders who came ashore were both from Midgard and the frontier, about 40 years after the War of Three Flags. It was a collaboration exploring missions to see if there were any more lands out there. Even though it had been a long time since the war, the Human Alliance didn't want another war like that occurring again. They approached the mountain in peace, which the locals received with open arms. After a few months, the people from the mountain officially joined the Human Alliance, with a special position. The mountain was deemed neutral territory. No one was allowed to claim land there for their nation. The monks also declared that the peak was a holy place, and if someone wanted to climb it, they must first receive permission from the head monk. While the second had no objections from the governments or the populations, the first had been tested plenty of times throughout Earth's history. A shining example of this would be what is justifiably claimed as one of Earth's weirder wars, see. War around the mountain. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoy it. If you want the next part of this video, turn on that bell notification. Like, subscribe and comment down below. And also check out the others videos I have created and enjoyed it. See you guys next video.